Okay, it looks
Looks
like
like we're good.
Streaming live and recording. Welcome everyone to our regular city council meeting. Tonight is July 14th, 2020. Per Executive Order 2020-5 issued by our Governor Gary Herbert, we are hosting this meeting on the line on Zoom. I will call this meeting to order, and Summer, please take us through a roll call attendance.
Okay, we have City Manager Joel Linares, Mayor Emily Niehaus, Ronnie Duressery, Moab City Council, Karen Guzman Newton, Moab City Council, Carly Castle, Assistant City Manager, Kaylin Jones, Moab City Council, Lori Simonson, City Attorney, Mike Duncan, Moab City Council, Tawny Knutson Boyd, Moab City Council, and Braden Bradford from the Southeastern Utah Health Department is waiting in the wings.
Thank you. Well, we'll bring him out now if you all don't mind. We are on agenda item 2 of our meeting, COVID-19 updates. It's been quite a 3 years that we've been dealing with this pandemic. Feels like it's been 3 years. So Brady, it's so wonderful to, well, having seen you for a moment. I think your video's off. There you are. Welcome to our meeting. Thank you so much for joining us. And it looks like you're going somewhere.
We actually have been, we had a free testing day down in Moab, and we are driving home. I'm not driving though, but had a successful testing event down at our office there today. So.
Well, I guess that kicks off your update. I'd just like to give you the opportunity to share some facts, and then council, if we could just roll right into a Q&A.
All right. Thanks for the invitation. We do get occasionally the city council members have reached out to ask for some clarification information. I encourage that. We love getting those questions. Sometimes we feel like information is getting where it needs to be, and it might not. So continue to reach out, and I appreciate that. I appreciate what you guys are doing. This has been a tough place for all of us. But from our point of view, we have stabilized at least in our ability to process what's happening in each of our communities, particularly in Grand. So we have our processes set in place for tracking positives, reaching out to their contacts and following up with them as well. As you've seen, if you've been tracking our data, we have had a little bit of a surge in both Grand County and Carbon County. The surge in Grand County can really be attributed to 2 separate events. Well, one household and another event that happened that resulted in several positives. So while certainly it's eye-opening when we have those, it's also actually reassuring to know that we have we know where the transmission came from. It's not just random community transmission. And then we don't know if we are kind of returning to normal, as we've seen a couple of days now with reduced or to no cases. It's certainly hard to say. We really like to take it a week or so at a time to look at the data. But there are several of those that have been ill or tested positive will be cleared in the coming days, and so that will be good as well. One thing that's changed significantly is that as we reach out to close contacts of positive cases, right now household members are really strongly encouraged to remain home, but if they're not members of the household, we still ask them to stay home, but there's not quite the same emphasis on that 14-day quarantine that happened earlier on in the pandemic, March, April, and May, particularly if they're asymptomatic, they may have an opportunity to return to work, and we encourage them to get tested. But a key point again is that we ask them to get tested 5 to 7 days after exposure. So if people are asking council members or the mayor what they know about it, we don't really like testing to happen as soon as they find out about their exposure, because often that leads to a false sense of security. So 5 to 7 days is kind of the sweet spot. Testing rates in Grand County are still fairly high compared to the rest of the state. And what we did today will add to that as well. We are over 20% of the population tested. Now, that's just on a numbers basis. We don't obviously know if it's actually 20% of the population, but we're well over 2,000 tests for Grand County, and that's a fairly significant number. We are starting to see more positives come through that are not residents of Grand County, and this has been a source of a lot of questions. So we've adjusted our website to combine those individuals that we know we've already treated or cared for, and we actually haven't had any of those in Grand County. We did have in Carbon and Emory counties individuals that were quarantined, treated, and cared for in their counties. In Grand County, those tests that have come through that are not of residents, those individuals have almost every one of them been out of the county by the time their test results come. So we notify them. We are working on a way to update that information regularly on our website, but haven't figured out a great way to do it without a lot of undue effort from our website folks, because we're still learning about how our website works with RAS. Anyway, as far that's Utah the last couple of days has seen a little bit of improvement. I'm sure that you are aware of the governor's mandate for mask use for employees and students on the campuses of K through 12 sites. There will be an official order to that effect that will come out soon that will clarify that for our school districts and community members. That will be important for them to see. And then again, there was the message that if Utah doesn't really respond well to this, there will be a statewide order potentially put in place similar to the one in Grand County. So that's me talking quite a bit. I hope I've covered some of your questions, but certainly happy to answer anything that you might have still.
Thank you, Brady, so much. Yep, Ronnie, go ahead.
So Braden, I sent you a few questions just really quickly. One of the questions that had resulted from the latest health order was, are local businesses required to be posting the flyers that the county put out about the order? Only because I've heard from some residents, it's confusing because you'll go into certain businesses and they won't have the flyer posted. So it's unclear to customers that there is a masking requirement. And we just didn't know if it was a requirement to post that or not.
Yes, it is a requirement to post that. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance yet to respond to your email, Ronnie, just because we were in that testing, but the posting of the signs is a requirement.
Okay, so if we or residents know businesses who don't have it posted, they can contact you and let you know who those businesses are?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have any added tips? I mean, I just hear from people about, certain businesses where they go in and staff routinely, have the mask either around their neck or, drooping off their nose. So it's just covering their mouth. Any advice on that? You just want to hear about those examples and you guys go talk to them?
We found that thus far, just talking to them and reminding them of the importance of having it properly has been beneficial.
Okay. And last two things. I just wanted to thank you guys for the information. And I know we have a hospitalized case yet, and I assume most of the information about that is private, but is there anything you can tell us about it? Because obviously it's our first hospitalized case. So
Yes, at least right now I can tell you that it is a high risk individual, and their risk factor is related to age. I don't have all the information in front of me, but
If they just left Moab, I wonder if they're like, that area right by Dalton Wells. Are you back? Or just for the airport? Let's just hold for just one more moment. Where are you, Brady?
I'm still on here, but
Oh,
am I back?
you are. Where are you?
We're just about to Green River. Can you hear me?
Oh, just about to Green River. Oh, right before Green River. It's a bad spot.
Yeah. I think we're through the worst of it, but you never know.
You heard it here, folks. Brady said we're through the worst of it.
Yeah, that's
Just
quote
kidding.
that. I don't. Can you hear me now? Then.
Yeah, better. Thank you.
I don't know what you caught. The individual is in a high risk age group, 65 plus, and I don't know the current status, but that is their main risk factor as far as I am aware.
okay, great. Thanks. I had a friend who came in to get tested today. So thanks again for offering that. Do you know if you guys are going to offer that again?
Yes, the plan is to offer it again, but we don't have a date firmed up. We certainly, well, yes, the plan is to offer it again sometime.
Okay.
Hopefully before school starts.
Okay, that was it for me.
Brady, I was just curious how many folks you were able to test today.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. It was how many were tested today?
Yes.
I didn't get the exact number, but it was probably somewhere between 160 and 170.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Connie?
I have a whole list, so I'll try to combine them into series. Somebody's asked me what recovered means, and can somebody be quote unquote recovered and still contagious or feel ill?
No, I mean, obviously we don't know everything, but we are, for our recovered, we're following CDC guidelines, which either it is really one of two things. They've gone 14 days from their date of diagnosis or symptom onset, or there are individuals that can become recovered 10 days from their date of symptom onset, as long as the last 3 days they have had zero symptoms. So having no symptoms is a key part of being recovered, because even if someone has gone 14, 15, 16 days from their symptom onset, if they are still ill, they won't be considered recovered. And we, if you look on the state website, they actually, because they don't know individual status, they just have a section for the number of people that are 14 days from their test and the number of people that are 21 days from their test. And they consider those 21 days recovered. We have the luxury of communicating with each one of our cases, and so we know their symptom status, and we can properly recover them when they have met all of those requirements. So no, they really wouldn't be infectious once they're recovered.
Who determines who should be tested? And what's the average turnaround time on results?
Right now, there are two categories for those that are tested. Anybody with any symptom of COVID can be tested, and as well as anybody that is a contact of a positive case can be tested. And we will refer the second group from the health department. We will refer them to the hospital for testing those contacts. If you are symptomatic, you can show up during a testing time and they'll process those individuals. Additionally, the hospital is working with high-risk occupations to bring groups of employees through just on a kind of a rotating schedule, so that we can see if there is kind of hidden asymptomatic cases in the community in some of these high-risk populations, and they are being managed through contact with business owners and managers and such. Was there a second part to that question?
What's the average turnaround time?
Right now, it's been pushed back a little bit. It's probably about 4 days right now, which is certainly not ideal. We had a good stretch where we were right at 2 days, but testing has become more popular again in the past couple of weeks since Utah's surged in their case numbers, and so that's pushed the delay another day or so.
So is it also 4 days on the asymptomatic testing that the hospital's doing?
Yes.
Okay. And just for the record, that testing's not like the one where they go up with the swab and like scramble your brain like a frog in biology class. I did it yesterday. It wasn't bad at all.
Yeah,
that was all I had. Thanks, Brady.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Brady, have a beautiful drive home. I hope you have a lovely sunset. Thanks for coming to Moab. Thanks for the information. Oh.
Thank you.
Really pretty. Yes. Okay. Drive safely.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm grateful to have had Brady with us. Lots to talk about there. Okay. Next we are on item number 3, our Open and Public Meetings Act training. Laurie, welcome.
Great.
Thank you. Take it away.
All right, so I have a PowerPoint, just not too long. And what we'll do, if you all are agreeable and the mayor's agreeable, I'll go through the PowerPoint, and then if people have questions, I've got a portion at the end where we can do questions, if that's okay.
That sounds like a great plan. Thanks, Laurie.
Okay. Okie doke. So I'm hoping that you can see my screen now. Is that correct? Okay, so Open and Public Meetings Act. Okay, come on. Let's see why we are not moving to the next slide. Here we go. Oops, sorry about that. Okay. So actually, I'm gonna have to go back here. So why are we here? Basically, because you have to be here. The state legislature has said that public officials need to get Open and Public Meetings Act training once a year. So this is the annual Open and Public Meetings Act training. And forgive me while I figure out the best way to negotiate from slide to slide. So why are we here? And now, oh boy, this is tough. I'm sorry. This is not working as easily as I thought. Okay.
You do see the irony of why are we here? Why are we on this slide here?
I know. Why are we stuck on this slide? So before, when I practiced this, the page up and page down worked flawlessly to move the slides from one to the next. But now, unfortunately, it's not working, and the up and down keys are not working. So I'm using the trackpad, which makes it a little tricky. So, okay. So what is the Open and Public Meetings Act? You all know it's the state's sunshine law. What it does is it sets the minimum requirements for transparency. So it's basically the floor, not the ceiling. If you are interested, here is the exact code reference section for you here. And et sec there is just Latin for everything that follows. So it's more than that one section there. It's a whole set of sections. So why do we have this law? Well, the legislature is very nice and spelled out why we have this law, and they put in public policy because basically you all are doing the people's business. That's what the legislature says. And so because you're doing the people's business, the legislature feels that you should take your actions openly and conduct your deliberations openly. So what does that mean for open meetings? What essentially means under state law is that meetings are open and are required to be open unless you have a provision under one of these code sections where you can close the meeting. I'm not going to go over all the ways that you can have a closed meeting, but think of it in terms of there are things that the city would need to logically discuss in private, such as pending litigation or the physical or mental health of an individual. Security things can be discussed in private. Real estate transactions where disclosing them in public would affect the city's ability to enter into a fair transaction, or just some of the examples. So the bottom line is the meeting has to be open unless there's a code provision that allows you to close it. So what is a meeting? This section is a lot of text, so we will unpack it in a second. But basically it's convening of a public body where a quorum is present, and it can include electronic communications, okay? And it is where you as a public body have jurisdiction or advisory power. So there's a lot that goes into that, meeting, but let's unpack it a little bit. What is not a meeting? The code makes it clear that a chance gathering or social gathering is not a meeting. And it is not a meeting if the convening of the public body wherein you have legislative and executive responsibilities, where no public funds are appropriated for expenditure, and the body is convened solely for discussion or implementation of administrative or operational matters for which no formal action of the public body is required, or that would not come before the public body for discussion or action. So we're going to kind of unpack a little bit of that, but what does convening mean? So this is why a chance social gathering is not a meeting. Convening means actually the calling together of a public body by a person who's authorized to do so for the purpose of discussing or acting upon a subject over which the body has jurisdiction or advisory power. So you actually have to basically call a meeting. So one of the other things that defines a meeting is a quorum. So what is a quorum? Well, conveniently enough, our municipal code defines what a quorum is. It's basically majority of the council. That's our Moab Municipal Code 204040. So what's the council? What do we define the council as? Well, the city also defines in our municipal code that we operate under a form of government identified under state code, which is Utah Code annotated 10-3B-301. So that section says, basically, we are a 6-member council form of government. easy enough. What does a quorum not include? So the state really only gives you one helpful point on this. The legislature said it does not include a meeting of 2 elected officials by themselves when no action, either formal or informal, is taken. That's as helpful as the state code is on what a quorum is not. Okay, so in this day and age, we, as the mayor pointed out at the start of the meeting, we are operating under all electronic meetings. And so we are permitted to do that because City Council recently passed Ordinance 2006 on March 20, 2020, setting forth our procedures for electronic meetings. So now codified in our municipal code, essentially it means that the City Council can hold meetings all electronically. So it essentially says a quorum of the City Council must be present to convene an electronic meeting, but need not be present at an anchor location, i.e. I'll need not be in the same place. And that elected officials and our city staff may participate in an electronic meeting from a remote location. So that is in our code, and that is how we've been operating. Many cities have been operating in the same way because of the COVID situation. So what about electronic communications? Not just electronic meetings. What about technology in general? What about email? What about text messages? So the code is clear that the act does cover electronic communications. So a meeting can be a quorum of the council, which is on an email or a text message or some other type of electronic communication, such as a Google Hangout or some type of other instant message. Hold on. Okay. So here's the thing. What if you want to hit reply to all on an email to the council offering your 2 cents on how you're going to vote? Going back to the policy or the legislature's intent in this, your deliberations must be open. So I'm going to share with you, you can get to the next slide here. This is our dog, Maple, Miss Maple. And this is the face that she makes when she's saying no to something. And in fact, actually, she doesn't say no, she says mo. So this is what she's going to say when you say, I want to hit reply to all, offering my 2 cents to the city council members on an item that's on an upcoming agenda. This is mo. Okay, that is not something you can do. But now, okay, so now your next question is, okay, but what about, I really want to text my fellow council members just to get them all on the same page before the next meeting. All right, maybe you know what's coming. Hold on a second here. Okay, there's Miss Maple again. She says, Mo, you can't do that. But your next question is, but how about, I would like to distribute a scientific study to my fellow council members that I think would be helpful. All right, so that's a legitimate question. And sorry, this is our other dog, Chops, and he says, sure, you can do that. So you can send information electronically to your fellow council members as long as there's no deliberation or you're not conducting, not conducting your matters openly and in public. So if you wanted to send a scientific study to your fellow council members and say, you know, here is something, a report, for example, that is informative, you can do that. What I say following that is just nobody hit reply to all and start deliberating on that information. Okay, so here's what you're probably thinking by now is this just seems very inefficient. Like, why can't we just figure things out on email and text message and everything like everybody does things these days and then just show up at the meeting and vote on it? Well, okay, but sure, that's not the intent of the law. It is more difficult, and I understand that it is not as efficient to have everything, all the information presented in a public meeting and deliberated on in a public meeting. But that's the intent of the law. And I think that David Church summed it up really well. In his handbook for municipal officials, he says the best way to avoid problems with the Open and Public Meetings Act is to err on the side of public openness. When in doubt, the meeting should be open. City councils and other committees or commissions of cities should not attempt to violate even the spirit of the act. It is important that the meeting not only be conducted in public, but the deliberations be conducted openly. It is not appropriate for members of the public body, such as city councils and planning commissions, to conduct their deliberations privately and then in the public meeting just perfunctorily conduct the vote. So that's good advice from David Church, who's the general counsel for Utah League of Cities and Towns. And so now that we know about meetings and what they are, what about notice? What notice do we have to provide for public meetings and public hearings? So it's pretty simple. Public meetings, 24 hours notice. Public hearings, 7 days notice. Our city annually needs to provide a publication of our anticipated meeting schedule. So we need to do that once a year. So what Utah distinguishes between a public hearing and a public meeting. So what's the difference? A public hearing is a hearing in which members of the public are provided a reasonable opportunity to comment on the subject of the hearing. There are certain topics where we're required to have a public hearing. A public meeting is different in the sense that it is a meeting required to be open to the public under the Open and Public Meetings Act, but which public comment is not necessarily allowed. So if we're going to have a public meeting, what needs to be in the notice? It's pretty simple. Basically the who, what, where, and when. So the agenda, the date, the time, and the place. And the purpose of that is so that the public can know when and where to show up and what is going to be discussed. So what needs to be in the agenda? So legislature is very clear. A public notice is required to include an agenda, and it shall provide reasonable specificity to notify the public as to the topics to be considered at the meeting. So, and each topic should be listed under an agenda item on the meeting agenda. So the issue really here is that you need to provide the public with enough information to at least know what you're going to talk about at the meeting. So the public would know whether or not they want to show up or be present to listen into that particular item. Things not on the agenda. So if an item is not on an agenda, no final action can be taken on that item at a public meeting. So the legislature is also very clear for other things at the discretion of the presiding member of the public body. So that is the mayor, or if the Tawny is the mayor pro tem, then that the presiding member of the public body can allow a topic raised by the public to be discussed in an open meeting if the topic is raised by the public was not included on the agenda or in advance public notice of the meeting. So that is at the discretion of essentially the chair of the meeting. So we talk about what happens on the enforcement side. The outcome is that a member of the public can challenge an action taken, and if it's found to be taken in violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act, a court can essentially invalidate the action that has been taken. The other issue that is individually, it is a Class B misdemeanor for a member of the public body to knowingly or intentionally violate the Open and Public Meetings Act. When things go wrong, because sometimes they do, it is not uncommon for public bodies to be sued under the Open and Public Meetings Act, and sometimes they lose. So in this case, the failure to include an item on the agenda, in this case, it was an ordinance which was passed by a county commission, was found by the Utah Supreme Court to have been a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act. So things can go wrong. So in that, I just ask you, you can ask yourself, what would Miss Maple do? That's what you should ask yourself. And then basically, and what is the policy behind the Open and Public Meetings Act? What are we trying to accomplish here? What is the purpose of it? And a disclaimer, this training is intended to be an overview of the Open and Public Meetings Act. It's not intended to cover everything because the act has a lot of parts of it, and this training doesn't need to go on for the entire city council meeting. So it's not intended to cover every aspect of the act. That's why you have me. You have me to answer specific questions about particular specified issues under certain circumstances. You can come to me. And that leads me to my next slide, which is, if you remember nothing else from this training, you have your 24-hour help desk here with a little asterisk there. That's your 24-hour help desk is me. That is my contact information. And as you can see, the little asterisk there is some restrictions may apply, calls from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. subject to additional fees. Okay, so that is, if you remember nothing else, call me. And then look, the end.
Yay.
Do you have questions following that?
Lori, that was so fun and adorable. Thank you for incorporating your loved ones with us for that. Let's go ahead and unshare your screen so we can see everybody. We've all taken this training before, but does anyone have any burning questions? Otherwise, other than some restrictions apply and only available hours asterisks.
I tried to read that fast like they do on the commercials, so yes.
Very funny and very fun. Thank you so much, Lori.
Thank you for letting me come and present this. I appreciate your patience and your time.
Absolutely. We appreciate you. Okay, moving right along. Approval of the minutes, section 4. We've got 3 sets of minutes, and I would entertain a motion. Karen?
I will unmute. So I move to approve the minutes for June 9th, June 23rd, and our special meeting on June 25th.
Thank you so much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ronnie. Any discussion?
I sent some edits to Summer for the 9th and the 23rd, and I think she's already made those. So thanks, Summer.
Thank you, Ronnie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'll call for the vote. Roll call. Ronnie?
Aye.
Kaylin?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. We are now on to mayor and council reports. And it's been a while, so hopefully we can get through this pretty quickly. Please have your pencils ready because I've got some resources to share. And I'll also follow up with an email to council so that I'm not spending too much time doing details of websites. I attended a water quality board meeting. Reminder that we have this sewer epidemiology study going on. It is deq.utah.gov/water-quality/SARS-cove-sewage-monitoring. And as of today, it looks as though we are increasing. Helpful reminder, you want to use log. You'll have 2 options for the chart. For the upper chart, you'll want to use log. And unless we have 5 cases per day reported, the bottom chart that is displayed on the website will just remain at a flat line. So, because we have such a small population, and we have small cases, a small number of cases, as compared to the rest of the state, it does look like we're reporting quite low numbers. But it's very helpful to, use that to compare the data. So while we think, oh my gosh, our cases are rising, we must have so much COVID-19 in our community. In looking at the sewer epidemiology data, it actually suggests that we don't, have a whole ton flowing into the system. So it's just helpful. It's just good data for us to have, and that's the website. And I'm very grateful to the Water Department of Environmental Quality, and honored to be on that board. I attended a Governor's Rural Partnership Board meeting. I will email to you a letter that I wrote, kind of representing rural cities. And I went through some drafts with the League of Cities and Towns, as I am appointed as sort of a rep for rural cities. I'll share that letter with you. And then also at the meeting, Mike McKee, the executive director of 7 County Coalition, nominated our county council member Curtis Wells to serve on that board with me. And so he was approved. So congratulations to Curtis Wells for joining the Governor's Rural Partnership Board. I attended meetings with the Utah Office of Recreation, and reached out to our federal representatives to share the letter that we all agreed to sign from last meeting, asking the BLM to cancel the September 2020 oil and gas lease sale. I heard back from them saying we hadn't heard about this. So I did share our letter with our reps and with the Office of Tourism. I attended the second Regional Transportation Plan stakeholder meeting. We mapped issues and ideas, and I will share links and pictures with this council of what we went over. I participate in a Climate Mayors peer network, and we are drafting a letter to congressional leaders supporting goals for COVID recovery that are kind of, groovy outlines for how money can be spent to rebuild after COVID. And not just go back to business as it was. I think you'll all dig it. So I'll send you that letter once it is ready for public viewing. It's still in draft right now. Reminder to all businesses, GoEd's got a whole ton of resources. So businesses that pay rent or need some assistance with additional PPE or signage, there is money available. Very grateful to GoEd for those things. Joel and I met with the police department, our officers, and I just wanted to say to them tonight, thank you, and that there is so much gratitude for their service. These are tough times as we kind of move through what the country is going through. And I just want to thank the officers for sitting with me and Joel and having a conversation. I just want those officers to know that they are valued, that they are loved by me and supported by this council and this community. And I very much look forward to the day when this pandemic has passed and we can all get together and barbecue. I want that. What else? There's this Grand County Economic Development Advisory Board that Zachariah asked me to be on, and it's how we're spending the SB 95 money. A couple of meetings ago, we decided to allocate, it's only 100,000 for our community, but we're allocating 4,000 for a Vista, 70,000 for businesses and entrepreneurship, and then 26,000 for education. So as that unfolds, we'll share the details of that distribution with all of us so that we can encourage people to apply and get those funds. What else? This was a lot. The Mill Creek Community Collaborative working on Powerhouse and Mill Creek in the Powerhouse Lane area. We are just finalizing, but getting very, very close to our community survey. As you all know, we were hoping to do much more community engagement with public, meetings where people could come and put stickers on ideas and things like that. But we had some subgroups working on more details to finalize that, and that's coming very soon. I met with Bianca Lyon. She works for the Utah Office of Tourism, and she's lovely. And I'm very encouraged by the shift in messaging for people to come to Moab and stay and have a deeper quality experience with us, based in, exploring science and nature and not just stamping your passport at the national parks. And thanks to her and that office and Teresa Foxley from EDC Utah, we had an extra 75,000 masks delivered to Moab. Really awesome, as it was timed so perfectly with the mask mandate when it went into effect. So I'm very grateful to our state for the resources that we are really feeling down here in Moab. I met with this really cool gentleman from Waterford Upstart. So preschoolers can get free preschool, like kids, like preschool, can have free through Waterford classes on, tablets. It's waterfordupstart.org/summer learning bridge /. It's software, it's not hardware. But it's basically for parents, it's guilt-free screen time that's fun for parents and their little kids. So for parents that are looking for resources for their preschoolers, that is really amazing that that's a free resource for Utah. It's a national thing and they want to do free for Utah for us. So that's very exciting. I wanted to share that. So close, almost done. I attended a cast mayors meeting, and that's largely mayors in mountain towns and just a couple gateway towns. And as it turns out, they are very anxious and would like very much to have a mask mandate. So while we find ourselves comparing, us to Colorado and thinking, oh, Colorado, they've got this mask mandate down, they don't. And mountain towns are definitely struggling with being flocked with tourists that are not practicing physical distancing, and they've got a lot of anxiety about whether or not their businesses are going to stay open through the season. I just thought that was interesting that, I got to brag about Utah and our governor giving us the opportunity to have a mandate. And finally, I attended an SBA roundtable, giving feedback to the SBA on how businesses navigated through PPE and what we want more of. And so very grateful to the SBA, but it just does look like, we're not through the pandemic, and we're certainly not through getting relief funding. So more on that soon, but and that's it from me. Karen?
So,
Yeah.
am I muted? Sorry.
Nope, you're
Okay.
good.
Mayor, I was just curious if anyone at your UDOT Regional Transportation Planning meeting discussed that the Technical Planning Assistant TPA program that UDOT has put out for call. Applications are due on August 3rd. And it's funding to integrate land use and transportation planning, maximize the value of investment in public infrastructure, increasing travel options to optimize mobility, and creating communities with opportunities to live, work, and play. And I know Zachariah was looking, and I don't know where things have gone now that he's out. Like, do we have somebody available to apply for these funds?
So those funds weren't directly talked about because it was really a mapping exercise that we did. I do worry about continuity. Elaine is the new Zachariah, and I don't know how much capacity she has to pick up those pieces. So maybe you and I can meet later, after this meeting, and maybe what we can do is follow up with our respective transportation meetings and people to make sure that we're not dropping balls like that.
Okay.
Maybe you and I could meet with Elaine specifically and just kind of have create a transportation list of sorts.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. Ronnie, you are up.
Okay, I think this will be pretty short. On June 25th, attended with many of you at the council workshop about the Walnut Lane project. Thanks again to the staff and folks for doing that. That was helpful. And on the 25th, we also had our EMS Special Service District Board meeting with the auditor, which went well. Several of my meetings are upcoming in the next week. We're going to have a EMS board meeting again on the 20th of July. We have a Moab Tailings Pile Steering Committee meeting coming up on the 28th. And tomorrow we have a System of Care Regional Advisory Committee meeting. And then oh, sorry. I was just going to tell you guys, I did come across an interesting article yesterday, but I was reading several before bed and now I'm forgetting the publication, but I will send you guys a good article I read on a lot of the urban planning that's going on now as people see more opportunities to plan for fewer cars, or just, looking at how much room a city has to put aside for vehicles and what opportunities it opens up when you plan differently. So that was a good one. I will find it and remember where I read it and send it to you. I was just going to see if we could get a report just when we get to the admin side, and which might already be built in, but if not, just a quick thing on 4th of July. I took my dog out of town, which she was happy about, but I did hear there were a lot of fireworks in the valley, and I just thought we could get a report on how that all went. And I know Lori Simonson sent us something saying that Utah League of Cities and Towns was rethinking a little more local control on that. So I just wasn't sure what the timeline was like for that, and if we thought it was a longer term thing or if it might impact Pioneer Day. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been reading the disturbing stories coming out of Blanding about the number of COVID cases at their care center. And I just wanted to thank our local Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District and Care Center for all the precautions they've been taking, because I think that speaks to part of the reason we haven't had cases. And knock on wood, we're all still hoping it stays that way, but it's really quite disturbing what's happened in Blanding. One more quick question for staff as we come around. I've just been getting some questions about whether we think it would be possible to have a lap swim on Sundays. So I'll just throw that one out there. And I'm just going to throw a thank you to our local dispatch, who helped me in my neighborhood with several loud parties from the same party of people who seemed to think it was necessary to break the law multiple nights in a row. So thank you, dispatch. That's it for me.
Thank you, Ronnie. Mike, you're up.
Okay, I got several water board meetings which related, which I won't try to go into here just to save time. The main thing is the hotspot focus group. Caitlin has been a part of that, as has Wes Shannon, who's the president of the Downtown Business Alliance, and in particular Matt Hancock, who's a talented guy, as I wrote up in one social piece. Anyway, so we've been working with Chuck and Carly, and Carly tells me that maybe in a couple of weeks from now, Chuck will have had a chance to do the latest passes on a series of streetscapes, I call them, and just basically what streets would look like if we modified them for more parking in 6 different blocks. And the basic idea that the Matt is big on, that Chuck is coming around to, is basically parking in the middle of the street, which means that if you're end to end, make it compact and can be interspersed with trees to make it look pretty and all that. And it sort of turns a block like that into what I might call a form of a pedestrian mall, all right? Because somebody who's parked the car in the middle of the road then has to cross a lane of traffic to get to a curb. And so it'll take some education for drivers, take some getting used to by motorists, but I really kind of like the idea because it'll basically slow down traffic with a little bit of driver ed, as I say, all around the downtown area. So I'm looking forward to that. And then about Carly thought that maybe a week after that, the focus group would get back to the Arches Hotspot Committee at large anyway, and then take it from there. So that's the big news there on the hotspot funding front. And I guess
When
I'll
did
just
you
stop.
get to see that plan? When will the community get to see that plan?
Well, I would think at the latest, you're really asking when you want to submit it for public review. I mean, the earliest it would be, I would think, Carly, correct me if you have a different idea, would be when Chuck gets back to the focus group and we reach a good consensus there. We're getting close now. It could also be maybe wait another week later until it's presented back to the committee at large and make sure we have a consensus there. And it's also important that the Downtown Business Alliance support all this. And Kalen has already arranged a preliminary agreement to do so before we ever started, bless his little heart. But not too much longer. I mean, we're all anxious to get that because you guys know what a big deal public feedback is. And this is a big deal. I mean, this is a lot of extra cars on the streets, which I think will be a good thing. Right? But a lot of, you know how things are, people don't want anything to change. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, thanks, Mike. Who's next? Tani.
Well, let's see. I'm sitting here in the dark. I think I can turn a light on. I attended the Canyonlands Health District Special Service District meeting. And a lot of it was administrative. But one thing that is important to note that the care centers is staff challenged right now. They've lost 7 aides and one's on maternity leave. They've got a nurse leaving, but they have only hired 2 PRN LPNs. So if you know people that want a very rewarding but very unsung job, being a nurse's aide is that job. I did it for a short period in my career and it is extremely rewarding. There was a lot of good positive things that happened at the care center during last month. They had a Father's Day celebration, and if you weren't a father, they got the gentleman got a t-shirt that was the world's best uncle. They're growing a little garden, and it's very prolific and bountiful. They are cooking up all their fresh veggies and really, really enjoying that. And the residents of our care center want to put together a cookbook. That's a winter project, but they've all got these great recipes that they remember from many years ago. And they want to do a cookbook, which I thought was great. We got a little bit of an update on the care center in Blanding. And while it sounds very, very bleak, and there are a lot of cases, as of last Thursday, none of those cases had to be hospitalized, and the symptoms were still manageable. So that was encouraging that I heard that, because I was really, really concerned about what was happening there also. And they are working with the Utah Department of Health to see if they can loosen the guidelines for visitors a little bit. A lot of these people are just really, really getting lonely and want to see their families, and it is a struggle for them. So nothing had been made, no decision had been made as of last Thursday. But there was definitely some consensus that it didn't seem quite fair to a lot of us that our visitors could come here basically and do what they want, and our own local loved ones can't see their own families. So I'm hopeful that the Utah Department of Health will come up with some guidelines that are doable, that still keep our residents safe. And on 7/9 last week, it was my interview day. I did an interview with Tanner Curtis of the University of Utah. He and a group of his fellow students are doing some studies about what gateway communities are doing in the face of COVID-19, how it's affecting them. They had a list of about 10 or 11 questions that they just went through. I spent about a half an hour on the phone with him, and I asked him what they were going to do with this study. And he said, we're not sure yet. And I said, well, if you publish it, please let us, please get a copy of it to us. And so I don't think that they've completely refined what they're doing with it, but they have reached out to several gateway communities. And I also did an interview for about 15 minutes with a reporter, Bobby McGill from Bloomberg News. And I was quoted in Bloomberg News. He was asking about the mineral leases. And my big national publication quote was, the cost just isn't worth the value. So I talked to him for 15 minutes and that's what he got. And I do want to give a shout out to one of our local businesses, and others may be doing this. This is just the one that I went to. Sweet Cravings has a little program that when you go there and buy your lunch for $12, you can buy lunch for one of our first responders, whether that be our police officers, our firemen, our frontline workers, EMTs. So if you've got an extra $12, I think that's a really good program. And the girls there told me that they have really enjoyed it. And like I said, other businesses might be doing that too. That was just the one that I saw yesterday. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Tani. Thanks so much. And Karen, you are muted.
You're gonna wish I was. Okay, so I attended the chamber board meeting at Zions Bank after our last council meeting the day after. Much of the discussion had to do with about the feasibility of participating in the 4th of July celebrations. As we all know, we came up with the decision that this year it would be best to not have a public event due to COVID rise in the state of Utah. And those of you who don't know, the chamber has moved offices and they're at the bottom of Zions Bank, just in case you wanted to know that. There was discussions again about the annual fundraisers that the chamber typically puts on, the golf tournament that all funds go for high school seniors. They're hoping that they're gonna have that tournament in September. The chamber banquet is going to take place this year on October 30th, the day before Halloween at Red Cliffs Lodge, and it's a masquerade ball or party. And then there was some discussion with the city, like asking the city if we could do a partnership for a downtown cleanup, because there seems to be some ambiguity as to who is responsible for the frontages of their businesses. So not just the sidewalks, but the curbs area. And if, the city would be interested in maybe doing, like if businesses do a weed cleanup, if this, the city would do a partnership and, maybe pick those weeds up and take them up to the landfill, or, but there was an overall sense that, businesses really don't know who's responsible for what. So if maybe we could kind of figure out what we could do communication wise with downtown businesses, that'd be great. I attended the special council meeting on the Walnut Lane project. We had a brief 4th of July meeting at the Moab Aquatic Center the day of the opening. That was exciting to see people come in, and I really thank the staff. I mean, they busted their heinies to get that open and ready for the community. So that was super cool. On the 24th, I listened in on the Utah Leads Together webinar on K-12 and higher education impacts on businesses. There's some really innovative things that are happening, and I don't know if the COVID has sort of brought a really terrible situation and has allowed some different thoughts to come out about how we are viewing education in the state of Utah. And the legislator has created through statute a new board of higher education, and it combines the board of regents and the board of trustees, which is 16 members and 2 students, to oversee 16 systems of higher education. There's 8 institutions of higher ed and 8 technical colleges. And the intention of this new board is to create more seamless structure for students coming out of high school and choosing what to do next. So the credit transfers will be easier. That's a big goal for this group. And the ability for students to go from one university or one technical school to another and have those credits transfer. And there's a focus on the ROI, the return of investment for students and for parents to focus not on the mastery of skills, but emphasis will be placed on personal and collective responsibility and emotional and social well-being of the students and civic engagement. So it's kind of an exciting time for higher education in Utah. And it's really prepping because they're expecting an explosion of growth for the state. And so they're trying to do the best for budding young adults as to, what's going to be most feasible and what businesses are going to need out of our youth. I attended an airport board meeting last Monday. The airport taxiway Alpha 1 and the commercial apron project is finishing ahead of schedule and is under budget, which is great. The ribbon cutting is this Thursday at 8:45 a.m. Anybody is welcome. Enplanements for SkyWest for June was 425. All aircraft enplanements was up to 750 compared to 245 last month. But it is down from last year when the numbers were at over 2,000. The board is interested in creating a solar project working group and has requested permission from the county council to do so. Interested parties would also include Rocky Mountain Power. So if anybody's interested, you feel free to reach out to Andrew Salzvig, the airport director, if you'd like to be on that group. And then I too participated in an interview with the U of U grad students. I had joined the Economic Task Force town hall on the 30th. Val, you ready for your pencils? He again gave, I cannot believe how much Utah is doing for businesses. So I'm just gonna get a quick synopsis. Like the mayor mentioned, the rental assist program is still ongoing. They've only distributed 3 million out of the 40 million that is allocated. There's been quite a few changes and it's making it easier for businesses to get rental assistance money. Before it was only for 1 month, now it's 2 months. It went from 10,000 to 15,000 as a cap. There's a new Shop in Utah grant that GoEd is working on, which is going to provide an incentive to shoppers by giving a discount. It's giving a discount to customers, and then the businesses are going to be able to apply to get reimbursed for that money that they actually discounted. So it's trying to create, shopper security and just more confidence in our businesses. The Heritage and Arts Grant is helping cultural and arts activities. There's $9 million available for that. And I'm sure that Mrs. Holland is aware of the money that is available. Then the Utah Office of Tourism has been given $12 million to help promote tourism inside of our state and with cooperation with our national parks. Another $5 million for small business. It's called Safe in Utah, and it's to help businesses either buy PPE, more PPE, or it's to change workplace structure. So let's say if a business wants to create a drive-through window, I mean, there's money, there's funds to be able to do that for businesses. Which is amazing. You can reach out to GoEd. You can call them at 801-538-8680, or you go to their link, coronavirusutah.gov/business for more information. Sorry guys, I'm almost done. participated in the ULCT COVID economic impact town hall yesterday. The most impactful information for me was Greg Bell's presentation. He's the president, CEO of the Utah Hospital Association, which represents 63 hospitals in our state, and his plea to the governor, which has not been successful to date, as we all know, is to have a mandate for mask usage. But at a minimum, he's requesting that all communities enact a masking mandate. Utah's seven-day average is running at 750 cases a day, and our percent positives for those who are testing has been at 10% for the last 2 weeks. The issue for health leaders, they are seeing we are getting close to our ICU capacities in more populated cities in our state. And so that's a concern. And we're getting close to reaching the point of overwhelming the physicians who are tasked with for offering care to COVID patients. And there's a fantastic study that was done by Goldman Sachs, and they performed, the study was illustrating that face mask mandates have large and highly statistically significant effects on health outcomes. That shows banning large-scale gatherings and wearing a mask can cut the growth rate of infection from 1.6 to 0.06. Wearing a mask is a substitute to lockdowns and can potentially save 5% of the GDP loss if we wear them. This wasn't a political study, it was purely economic. So again, I really hope that at the end of the month, when the governor looks at a mandate for the state of Utah, he will take in consideration that it can have a big effect. So that was it.
Thank you, Karen. Kaylin, you're up.
So I attended the Arches Hotspot Downtown Subcommittee meeting, as Mike reported on. And just to clarify a little bit to your question, Mayor, it seems like our short-term goal is to pursue the funding for the hotspot. And so part of that, our primary goal is assessing how much parking as well as other amenities we can do on downtown city streets. But we acknowledge that ideally this design would be both better articulated and the public engagement would be stronger after we get funding for it. So by necessity, design is happening now, but we acknowledge that there will be more work to do, presuming that we're successful with the UDOT Transportation Commission. But Matt and Mike and the engineering staff are doing a great job at developing these proposals. I attended a housing task force. We toured the new senior housing, which was lovely. They're still taking applications. I think the thing that really struck me, because I hadn't seen design for it, was the landscaping, which is nearly complete, and just some really nice land plantings and sitting areas and vegetable gardening raised beds. And there's also cornhole. There's not pickleball, but there is cornhole. The Moab Dark Skies had a meeting. Much of that was dealing with a comment letter on the September oil and gas lease sale, commenting to the county, just articulating the potential impacts to night skies, as well as the many other issues that we're well aware of. I attended the regional transportation planning meeting, as the mayor reported. And so that was, in addition to reviewing the existing conditions, we did the map-based exercise, and it was just interesting to see the range of issues because it is a diverse and numerous stakeholder group. And so people had tons of interesting ideas that range from the somewhat general to very specific issues and solutions. Had a solid waste special service district board meeting, which typically, as usual, deals with a lot of administrative matters related to the funding of large yellow pieces of equipment. But the household hazardous waste is being postponed until we can tell if we can afford to run it this year, since it incurs a non-trivial cost. But e-waste is now weekly, every Saturday from 8 to 1. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Kaylin. We did it. We're through council reports. Joel, you are up. We are at administrative reports, item number 6 on our agenda.
I will try and be as quick as possible. Nora is going to present as well, so I'll go real quick and I'll get through my stuff and we'll get going. Yesterday we had the microburst storm come through. We had damage sustained at the salt shed down at the city shop. The southern wall blew off entirely, so we're taking photos. We have it marked off, and we're going to be turning that over to the trust and trying to file a claim on it and try and get it fixed. But literally, it blew the entire side of, and not just the sheeting off the building. It ripped the 2x4s right out of the wall. So it wasn't even like we could just put the steel back up and tack it back up. So
It looks
yeah.
pretty impressive, actually.
I couldn't believe that it literally ripped the entire wall down. Not just, usually you go down there and the sheeting's gone and you go get the sheeting and put it back up. So when I first heard that the wall got torn down, I was like, well, put some screws in it. But when I got down there and looked at it this morning, I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. It ripped the 2x4s right out of the wall and everything. So pretty substantial. All city buildings are open to the public. We want to remind everyone that there are mask mandates for city buildings. If you come into City Hall or into our city buildings, that you are expected to wear a mask. So please come in. Everyone's been great about it. We haven't had really any issues at our facilities with the masks. So it's been really good. I want to thank the Rotary Club and Dan Mick for repairing and replacing the fence along the edge of Rotary Park. It was a couple decades old and the wood had failed, and the city purchased all the materials, but they provided all the labor and they donated all their time and they rebuilt the entire fence down that line, and it looks great. And so I just want to thank the Rotary Club for helping with the park that they created and gave to the city, and keeping on with being a team player in that and helping where they can. And you know, that free labor right now goes a long ways for us. So I really appreciate that. The mark, to Ronnie's point, we are going to have a lap swim starting Sunday from 11 to 1:30. And we're looking to start opening the gym on Friday as well. The gym will be by reservation only. And currently you can go to the Facebook page, or you can call I said the mark, I meant the MRAC, I apologize. I always do that. You got to know by now, but nonetheless. The MRAC, they can go to the Facebook or they can call the MRAC. We're working on getting that online from the city's webpage as well. But if you want to use the gym facility, you will have to have a reserved spot. And that way you can go down there and work out. This is probably as expansive as we can go under the situation that we're in, mainly financially. You know, it's still not making money and we're subsidizing the operations of it. So this is it for a while. And we're gonna have to take assessment once school gets back in session and we have all the kids back in school and we don't have that money coming in to see what we can keep doing. So that's where we're at with that right now. The widening is ongoing, and Ryan Anderson and LeGrand have been responsive to issues. They've been responsive to citizens. I want to thank those guys for listening to the community and addressing issues as they've popped up. And so it is on schedule. It's clicking right along. We're about 6 months, almost 6. We started very 1st of March, so March, April, May, June, July. We're getting close to halfway. So going quick, it's looking great. Yeah, that's about where we're at. Is there any questions for me on anything else? Ronnie?
Joel, are there any COVID related budget updates that you want us to know about, or nothing yet? I figured it was maybe too early in July to have any tax info come in.
We're about a week away from getting what will be July's numbers, which will actually be May's numbers. And so really curious to see how that's going to shake out. We're also about 2 weeks into the MRAC being back open. So really crunching numbers on that as well. We're also crunching numbers for the RAP tax and preparing the RAP tax. We have been meeting as a group with citizens who are helping. We have been getting a process going for the community outreach for that. Makeda has been brought onto our admin team a little bit with Lisa, myself, Lori, and Carly, and we have been working really hard at getting the rat tax prepped up and ready to go. We think we have a really good game plan, and we expect to be rolling that out in about a month. July is kind of our prep month that we've been working through, and we're trying to get stuff ready for that. And then we plan on August and September really rolling that out before ballots go out mid-October. So those are the numbers. Probably looking at an update at the next meeting on the 24th is what I'm hoping. Last time we didn't have our numbers back by the 24th, but we did manage to call the state and get rough estimates that were pretty close as to what we could expect. And if we don't have the numbers by then, we'll do the same thing again.
Okay, cool. And then was there anything from you and Lori about fireworks, either kind of how it went 4th of July and or any pending changes we should be expecting about local control with fireworks and stuff?
So state law mandates how they're governed. So I would be shocked if we saw anything by Pioneer Day. I wouldn't expect any difference before now and then. The league's aspect is legislative changes, and so that would become January before the next holiday season of next summer. I normally get a big rundown on all the problems we had after the 4th of July, and I didn't get one this year. It was I mean, obviously there are always illegal fireworks going off. The rundowns I get are for vandalism and for fires, and there wasn't a lot of that this year.
Thanks.
I can tell you, Ronnie, that I was at a guest house up in the Mountain View subdivision, and the resident right next door to him shot off rockets all night long, and people went, "Oh, that's illegal, let's all get out." And I thought about going over and getting in his face about it and all, and decided as long as he didn't say anything on fire, I wasn't going to say anything about it. But boy, I was going to throw the book at him if anything did. But that's the way I accepted it. I don't know if you've done the same thing.
And I mean, I don't want to say that's our approach as well, Councilmember Duncan, but the illegal fireworks are so rampant, it's like, short of causing fires and causing property damage, it'd be about every third house we'd have an issue with if we tried to go out and enjoy.
Yeah.
All right,
Thanks, Joel. Thanks for all that.
So Nora's here, and I'll turn the time over to Nora to talk to you about, I can't remember what it was, so I'll let her go nuts.
Hi, everybody. So as you all are aware, these are unusual times. And so we're getting some unusual requests, and some of them are kind of fun and innovative and mothers of invention. You know, they're creations based upon the fix that we're in, which is really kind of cool to see people come up with creative ideas. So we were approached by a business owner, a restaurant owner on Center Street, who wants to put up some outdoor seating, probably not a lot more than umbrellas and tables and some kind of demarcation. And the actual seating area would be on our city street. And normally it would take a legislative action. We'd have to change our land use code in order to go through the process, the public hearing process to amend the code. But because of COVID, there are many communities in Utah and in Colorado especially, and other places all over the country have adopted the ability for there to be temporary outdoor dining as a COVID strategy. So it wouldn't necessarily be a zoning action. It would be a temporary use that could be administered at a staff level or administratively to allow these types of creative outdoor dining opportunities. So we've been talking about it with our staff, and you know, we all try and strive to be nimble and to do cool things and try new things, and so we're trying to figure out a way that we can accommodate this kind of thing on a limited basis. And again, it would be purely temporary, relating directly to COVID and distancing and getting people outdoors instead of inside. So what I'm interested in is the city council interested in developing an administrative process to allow these kinds of things. So a process that we could deal with at an administrative level and not necessarily go through a legislative change. And the nuts and bolts of that, we need to come back to you with. But one of the things that is a little bit of a concern is that this hasn't really been vetted in public very much. And if we were to do it as an administrative direction, administrative action just for the short term, we may hear from other businesses and property owners and other Moab citizens who felt like there wasn't adequate public process. So that's something that if we decide to go this route, we need to be prepared for and we need to respond to. So just sort of a heads up on that. There are some things that we will also need to address that include liability, because we're talking about putting things in the city right of way, traffic control, which is really important, and safety of the outdoor diners. In some locations, there may be storm drainage issues that we'll have to deal with. Probably some kind of an encroachment agreement that again talks about the liability. And as I mentioned, they could be as simple as some umbrellas and tables and chairs and, you know, maybe some landscaping in pots or something like that that's easily movable. There are communities in Utah and in Colorado and probably elsewhere who allow this every season. And they allow folks to apply to put outdoor dining decks or outdoor dining patios in the public right of way for the season, and they're removable, so they get built in in the spring and then get taken down in the fall. If we were to go this way and we decide that it's cool and it's something that we want to look at further, we could do a legislative change to our code to allow it, but that may be in conflict with the direction we seem to be going with the hotspot funding. Because in the hotspot funding, we're trying to achieve is more parking spaces, and this kind of approach would actually eliminate parking spaces and allow businesses to use the parking spaces adjacent to their businesses. We're considering looking at just a very small area at this point in time. That's certainly not Main Street. We can't do it on Main Street. Nobody wants to do it on Main Street, and it's, we can't because it's a state highway. But we were thinking about the possibility of doing East Center Street sort of as a pilot and seeing if the one business that we have been contacted by is on West Center, and there may be a couple others where it may make sense. And so what I wanted to get from the City Council tonight is this something you want to consider on a short-term sort of emergency COVID basis for the next few months, whether it be till the end of the year or November, or and if so, exactly where? We're suggesting maybe East Center, and what the time frame, how long we might be able to consider those to be in place. So
for the ease of getting that feedback, let me just prompt the council with a few questions and we can just straw poll it. How about that, Nora? So are we comfortable with staff moving forward with bringing us back at the next council meeting, I guess, parameters? Is one question. The second question is, do we want to stick with Nora's proposed temporary timeline to terminate? So this, any permits would terminate. When would that be? When would you propose, Nora?
And you guys can give me direction on that. It could be November 15th, could be after Thanksgiving. And I think the mayor and I talked at one point about perhaps the end of the year. So I would need some direction on that as well.
Where it's going to be temporary and they're going to come out anyways, I would request that it be somewhere between October 31st and Thanksgiving, just to have it out of there December-ish for snow removal reasons. So we do get snow some years. And if we did want to make it permanent at a later date, we could plan on how to do snow removal around it. But where we know it's temporary and they're coming out anyways, it would just be easier if they were out December 1-ish. So if we have snow.
So then proposed is November 15, and then location that you proposed is East Center only?
At this time, we talked a little bit about First North and First South. And I haven't had really an opportunity to kind of look at all of those blocks to see who might be interested and what the feasibility and safety issues might be related to that. I can certainly look at those if the council wants to broaden the scope a little bit.
We could even do East and West Center from first east to first west. Just both sides of center of Maine.
Okay, so council, do you have some questions? Yeah, Tani?
Well, I have disclosure.
Oh,
The business that we're talking about is in the same building that my husband's business is in. So I don't know if that means I have a conflict or I don't. I'm not opposed to hearing what the parameters are and seeing how we move forward.
mhm.
There are 3 restaurants in that particular building. So one already has outdoor seating. So what we would do, I believe should be fair to all of the businesses that are currently there.
Correct.
So yeah, I don't have an issue moving forward, but as I think about it, I may have a conflict.
And we're providing direction, not decision tonight, so, right?
Yeah.
Karen?
Okay, so I've given this some thought because I mean, most of the meetings that we participate with in Colorado, I mean, they're trying to do everything that they can to be inventive in this pandemic. And I really believe that we owe it to our local businesses to do whatever it takes for people to be able to survive. And this is, you know, extraordinary circumstances. And but I am not super comfortable with just saying, okay, you know, on East Center, they can try it out. Like and I would prefer that we were open to, I mean, if there's other restaurants that it could be applicable to, that we look at all of them, not just say we're gonna, you know, try to do a pilot program with one. You know, I like the idea that, go ahead, Joel.
That's a great question. It's a great comment. It's a concern we've talked about several times. So we're trying to narrowly tailor it because we're doing this so quickly. There's a lack of potentially creating a due process review for those who are applying for it. And so one way to tailor it is to say it's only allowed on this block as a trial block and we see how it works there. Another way to tailor it would be to say it's only eligible for restaurants. Right now, we're not saying what type of business type it's eligible.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. You are such a lawyer. Okay.
And that's what I would recommend too, that we consider for restaurants. When we start talking about everybody putting merchandise in parking spaces or whatever, I think that we run into lots of issues related to that. But I think it probably makes the most sense for restaurants where we're trying to get people to sit and enjoy, but be socially distanced.
You know, when you look, you know, that questionnaire that Tawny and I participated in, you know, one of the questions is like, what is the hardest hit businesses in your community? And, you know, restaurants by far and large, I mean, they are under the gun and things have, it's really difficult for them. So if there's a way that we can just ease any sort of burden, I am all for that. And Nora, I kind of disagree with, you know, I know we are trying to create more parking, but this, you know, if we do go forward with this plan, there's going to be options for, you know, like this pedestrian, you know, living, working space. And so, I mean, this is a really great opportunity and it just drives home the point we need public transportation because, I mean, this would be fabulous. I mean, it really, It really would. So I mean, I'm all for it. And I'm for if we could figure out a way to ask the restaurants to encourage their patronage to ride their bicycles or to walk.
We could talk about a bike share program later tonight. That might help with that. I'm just saying.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then I think Karen's right. A part of what we've seen over the last couple of years is we don't have enough restaurants to feed the number of patrons we have coming into the community. Well, through COVID, the hotels are still coming. The building of those who were vested prior to the overnight accommodations moratorium are still coming in. And we've seen several restaurants close because of COVID. If we lose more, that problem is just going to get worse. This would allow those businesses who are here to maybe survive. And then also all those buildings that are along, let's just talk about Center because it's the one we started with, and acknowledging that if we go restaurants, it could be citywide. But there's several other buildings that are on Center that aren't being used, or over on First North that aren't being used, that all of a sudden, if this is a possibility, those buildings have a higher use value because now they could be used as a restaurant if they have the ability to go out into the street and have seating in the parking areas. So all of a sudden it could potentially take buildings that historically have not been thought of as a potential eating establishment and could become an eating establishment.
Another thing that we could consider along there is we could possibly approach the MIC or the county. They have a big parking lot there. It's not very often full. I mean, some of those other businesses that aren't restaurants, or even the restaurants, could encourage some of their patrons to park at the MIC and walk on up, because that part of Center Street's really wide. It's not squished in there, and there's room to do things there.
Good point.
Ronnie, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, so a few things. Obviously, I've seen this in places, and I followed some of the stories about it in places. And in general, I think it's a good idea. But like Karen, equity is a big concern for me. Like I know I would prefer to have a time period where we can gather some input from the Business Alliance and the chamber, just because I think people will have some ideas. I like the idea. I don't know how it will impact like parking concerns for neighboring businesses. Like if I have a hair salon or if I have a retail place, I just feel like all those business owners should have an opportunity to say something, or at least weigh in their thoughts. And I'm also concerned with restaurant owners who are going to feel like, well, I'm not on Center, or I'm actually on Main, so I can't do this because I'm on Main, and this is one of my competitors. So I just feel like we owe people the opportunity of at least a little time to give us some feedback, just because they may have other good ideas. But obviously I've seen this work in other communities. One thing we have to keep in mind that you see in other communities is if the color or the COVID phasing shifts, then that can impact something like this happening. Like this has been going on in some places in California, but now because of increasing cases, they've had to reduce outdoor service of food. So just know that it could come and go with the shift change as well. But my main concerns are just a little bit of time for people to offer feedback and know about it, and equity, so it is an option that's available to more people. And then just especially with that location, discussion with law enforcement and the fire department, because they're just around the corner. And I just want to make sure somebody talks to them, because that's a kind of a potential corridor for them, just so they weigh in on that. And then in most places I've seen, it does come with some kind of fence, often at shoulder or waist height, both for it just helps a little bit as a visual. So
real quickly, couple things. I agree, we talked about today how this would affect the other businesses that are in that building, not only in that building, but once you start putting everyone out into the street, people will start parking around the corners and down the other streets, affecting those businesses that aren't even on the street that the restaurant is. And so one idea that we had, and what we've seen in other communities, is they only allow it on Sunday, or they only allow it Friday through Sunday, or Saturday and Sunday. So that way, if those other businesses tend to be Monday through Friday type business, and you're only allowing this use on Saturday and Sunday, that spillover is not happening to those other businesses as much. That conflict is reduced. That's one way potentially try and address that. I think the idea that Karen has of designating it to restaurants would address the idea that it's available to everyone, not just those on center. I think that's a great idea. And I think that would address that issue, that it's not fair because my business is located off that block. I think that addresses that. The last one, and again, the other business impact, that's a decision that we need direction from you guys on. Is this something we want to allow them to do 7 days a week, or do we want to limit it to weekends? So other businesses impact is not so much. I like the idea of limiting it to weekends because of that. And I also like the idea of limiting it to weekends because it prevents business owners from going out and building more permanent structures in our public right of way and having to deal with that problem that you don't own this property, we're just letting you use it. You can never have a claim to adversely possessing governmental property. So it wouldn't matter if we let them go out there and use it for 20 years. If we don't let them build anything, we could tell them to get off of it tomorrow and they could never lay a claim to it. But I like the idea of them not being able to set up permanent structures, not being able to build any sort of infrastructure, and then knowing that they have to clean it up and take it off every so often, because that doesn't ever create that perception of I have a right to this. And so I like that idea as well. Lastly, the time period to gather info, that's the normal process for how we would do this. And I want to emphasize that. All I have heard from this council since I've been here is we want transparency, we want more public process, we want more public hearings, we want more people involved, we want more information gathered. And I agree with all of those things. And we're still dealing with things where that process wasn't followed before I got here. We're still cleaning up that mess. And so we're not looking as a staff to create those new problems for you. And if that's the direction this council wants to go, we understand that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to respond to COVID and give these people an ability to survive in their business immediately, preferably to have this in place and have them in a situation where they're ready to go before Labor Day, which is the next big busy season for us, Labor Day through October. And so that's our goal, is just to provide that service of governance for those businesses in that time frame. If it's not the wish of this council to do that, if we want to take a longer period, if we want to wait and put this off until next year and actually go through the land use process, we completely understand that. We acknowledge that if we go through this faster and we have a quick process and we have not done the land use part of it, we do it under a COVID mentality, which is completely reasonable in the times. Like, we used to make decisions over months. We literally are making decisions sometimes at 8 a.m. and by noon, the decision we made at 8 a.m. is no longer the best decision because things have changed so much in 4 hours, So it's just changing and evolving so fast right now that the goal is to provide assistance and support now, and then do it for 4 months, get that information, pull back entirely, and then have the winner with that information to see what the impact was and how we would tweak it if we want to do it again, if we want to change it. If it's the desire of this council have a full vetted process like we've talked about, that we understand, that we prefer, we're fine with that. We're just trying to give you guys options as to, this is one way we can make this happen quickly to help these businesses survive or do better. Maybe not survive, that might be a little too drastic, do better. If that's not the route we want to take and it's something we want to look at more long-term come into March, that's entirely up to you guys.
So just one follow-up question. If I'm a business on 100 South or Main Street, can I get one of those slots on center in the street?
No, it would be restricted to the in front of your business. So we're not going to limit it to center. It doesn't sound like. It seems more like we're going to limit it to restaurants. And so if you're over on First West and you're a business on First West and you have parking stalls in front of your business, you could apply for it then. Any restaurant with parking in front of it where it has the eligible common public space that we could use for this and still have a public right of way, we would make it so it could happen. Obviously, some businesses in town are built right up to the curb. If there's no space and there's no parking in front of their building, if there's no parking, there's no place to do it.
And I would assume that we would do it for businesses that don't already have opportunities for outdoor seating. So, and again, that's a sort of a fairness issue if people already have it. So we're trying to provide a creative solution to those who don't have that opportunity just because of the configuration of their lots.
So I'd like to commend Nora for bringing this to us. I think it's really exciting and a great opportunity to help these businesses survive and to help our visitors have places to eat. I don't think it's necessarily in conflict with what the hotspot downtown subcommittee is working on, because in the draft plans, there's a lot of area that's devoted to landscaping, and that's flexible space. One of the things we've talked about is doing the build out in a way that doesn't have a lot of concrete and elevation changes, so that there is flexibility, because we know that how we solve mobility is evolving quickly. And we don't want to lock ourselves into something that seems like the right solution now, but in 20 years, doesn't work so well. And also it's cheaper. So one of the things, you've probably seen the plans, but one of the things we're talking about most actively is doing parallel parking on the sides of the streets, and then a double row of diagonal in the middle. And this would actually, if that were implemented and we had parklets in front of restaurants, that would actually take up less parking spaces, because we weren't impacting the diagonal parking on the sides. I even wonder, could we restripe the streets now? I really like the idea of moving fast, experimenting, and seeing what works, as opposed to spending a lot of time on a process. Some process is important, but if we commit to something and it's not quite right, then, and we've invested a lot of time into it, whereas if we experiment and try different things, then that gives us feedback too, as long as we have adequate transparency and engagement, and people understand that we're experimenting because we don't know what the right solution is, and we can't solve it just by talking about it in meetings. Like, part of the way we get to solutions is by trying things. That's how lots of businesses solve things. So I wonder about like going ahead and restriping. Paint is cheap, relatively speaking, and doing the parallel parking along the edge and using that. But I would welcome a draft of what you're proposing at our next meeting.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to second what Kaylin is suggesting and what Joel suggested too. And I don't think there's any conflict at all between hotspot parking. Even if all this comes to pass, you won't see anything happen for a year. Okay, so yeah, I like the experiment approach. And Nora, keep it, so it's can't possibly get out of hand, but I think it's a great idea. And
I can't promise it won't get out of hand, believe me.
The only other thing I suggest, hopefully there's one or more journalists listening to this presentation, as they often do. And if you're out there, kids, put this in the paper, and that'll pick up some feedback from other businesses as well.
Karen?
Sorry, I'm just curious, Joel and Nora, if you guys have given thought. So I'm thinking of a particular Mexican restaurant on Main Street. Like, do we have any flexibility to say, like, oh, they can have 2 tables right at the front of their business for outdoor seat? I mean, like, is there, I mean, we're trying to be equitable. You don't want to not do this just because there's potentially, a handful that can't do it. But
the problem with your hypothetical, Karen, is anything that's along Main Street, anyone who has an address that's a Main Street address, we can't so much as like hang a sign above the sidewalk on Main without getting the state involved. Like, that is their right of way, they control it.
However, we could look at flexibility in the alleyway.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the next logical step. Is
So if we were to receive an application from a Main Street business for an alleyway, which, by the way, they own, many of them own that like chunk behind them, that could be a can of worms, and that might be a no on their application. But
that's a great idea, and we all realize that this is just groupthink, and there's no bad ideas until we got to work through them. A lot of that alleyway is used by the other businesses to access businesses further down, but we'll definitely take it on a case-by-case scenario and look at it and see, like, if you're at the end, if you're not in the middle and people have to drive through where you're set up, I mean, I think the alleyway is a great idea potentially.
I would just like to say that, I mean, I wouldn't want to just say, oh, UDOT's going to say no, and I mean, if there was like a tiny table at the front, I mean, I think they're in the same circumstances that the whole nation is in. I mean, you
I
know,
completely agree with you completely, and I don't mean to infer like UDOT will say no. I'm just saying we don't have the authority in-house like we do
absolutely.
first used to go, yep, we approve it, go do it tomorrow.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
no.
the process will bog down and change dramatically if they are trying to do something on that corridor.
I just would like to, you know, have that, you know, the availability to say, okay, well, maybe you guys don't get this because you do have a Main Street business, but, you know, we could ask UDOT if you could have 2 tables. I mean, I don't know if there's even the space for that, but it wouldn't hurt without, you know, it's not gonna hurt by
We'll
asking.
try and look at developing a process for those who are on Main. If nothing else, we could say to them, this is your contact point for UDOT, talk to them, and if they sign
Absolutely.
off on it,
Yep.
then we'll.
But there are a number of businesses on Main Street that already have a couple little tables. And I don't see anybody enforcing anything real rigorously on that. I think the concern is that
Well, that's the use on the sidewalk, and we're talking about the use on the street.
Yeah, I'm talking about sidewalk space.
It could be either, Karen. You're saying UDOT will go with.
Okay, gotcha.
You know what, everybody? It's 8:52. We're still on reports.
Wait, I'm sorry, Mayor. I have a couple more things I need nailed down before we move on though.
About the parklet?
Yes.
About okay.
I have one more main thing that I want to nail down just because it will help immensely. Collectively, are we thinking this is something we want to let them do every day, 7 days a week until November 15th? Or is this something we want to say you can only do it Monday or Saturday, Sunday, Friday through Sunday? What are you guys thinking on the timeframes?
I like the weekend timeframe.
Yeah.
I would include Thursday on that weekend. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
I'm okay with that.
I'd include Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday too.
Okay.
I'm cool all through the week. I let them work it out. They'll figure this out. Okay.
I agree with Kaylin and Mike.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Now can we move on?
Nora, do you have anything else you feel like we got to get? I took a ton of notes and I think I got most of them, but anything else?
No, that's fine. I mean, we will back to you and put it, you know, have it as an agenda item listed on the agenda so that we can have some additional discussion and more formal direction.
Perfect.
Thank you, staff, so very much for this effort because it's above and beyond and it really does help businesses. Thank you so much. We're moving on. Number 7, citizens to be heard. Reminder that all comments are submitted electronically as we are meeting electronically, and that if people want to read those citizens to be heard comments, they can go to our city website under City Council, and it's on the right-hand side of the page, and you can click and see comments of citizens to be heard, as well as collated comments about the Bike Skills Park. Let's see, we're in section 8, new business. 8.1, proposal to develop a Moab community garden at Anonymous Park, briefing and possible action.
I'm up. Is that me?
That would be you, Carly.
All right, I'll take it away. And I believe Makeda and Becky Mann are joining us as well. So I'll try to make this nice and quick as we go through this. So I'm speaking to you about the proposal that Moab Community Gardens has submitted to the city to develop a community garden in the northwest corner of Anonymous Park. So Becky Mann and Makeda Barkley with Moab Community Gardens are also here to give a brief presentation if you want to hear it and to talk about the nuts and bolts of the proposal. But first, I want to provide some context that may help guide this discussion. So the city staff have spent a good amount of time evaluating this proposal, but it's by no means set in stone or totally developed. There are plenty of outstanding issues that should be considered, and there's plenty of process that still needs to happen if we were to enter into an MOU, and that's open here. However, this additional work will take staff time and resources. So what we need tonight from this council is whether you have any appetite for us to continue down this path. And if yes, if you do want us to pursue it, we would like your feedback on the preferred site and on public engagement for this project. And I also want to address what kind of process was deployed up to this point, because I got some questions from council as well, and I imagine the community has questions. So when a city administration is approached about a project such as this, it's typical for the administration to spend some time internally evaluating it for preliminary feasibility. Because if it's not even feasible, doesn't rise to the level of approaching you about it or even approaching the community about it. Feasibility evaluations vary project to project. And in this case, we evaluated a few things. So first, whether the project fulfills a community need. In their proposal, Moab Community Gardens speaks to the increasing demand for garden space, and more specifically, garden space in town, so residents can have like easy, bikeable, walkable access to the amenity. Second, we evaluated whether it aligns with city goals. And under the local food section of Moab's draft sustainability plan, the plan provides that a long to short-term goal is to, quote, allow Moab Community Gardens, this organization, to use select city properties for community gardening spaces. So a project like this clearly aligns with the goals set out in the sustainability plan. And a third element of the feasibility is whether there's actual physical space that can accommodate this use. This is an important consideration because the city's property portfolio is pretty limited. So it's quite possible that we might not have had a space that even fulfills all the criteria that Moab Community Gardens would need. A natural result, of a site feasibility exercise is that the list of potential eligible properties is narrowed. So it's important to understand that what we have for you today is a preferred site. It's not the finalized site. We all recognize that additional feasibility and public engagement needs to happen before any agreement can be signed. And I can talk more about site selection criteria if you want to, but absent that, do we want to turn it over to Makeda and to Becky? Hello?
Yes, yes, we do. Makeda, oh, there you go.
Okay, cool. Hi guys, I'm Makeda. I know some of you / I've met all of you. I want to just quick reiterate, well, I guess first of all, I'm a part of the MOCOM team. I've been a part of the MOCOM team for I think a year and a half now. Becky was the founder, but I've been a part of the team for a little bit of time now. And yeah, go ahead, Becky, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Makeda. We put together a presentation, and I don't know if it's possible to share that presentation with the city council right now.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you wanted to introduce yourself first or not.
Oh, sure. Yeah, my name's Becky Mann, and I've been a resident of Moab since 2016. And just personally, community gardens are of interest because I feel like it's a great way to meet people in the community and feel like you're a part of the community, and they've played a role in my life. So I've always been interested in just increasing that component in town. So it's a project that, just kind of took off. So we'll give you a little bit of background on how we've formed and what we're doing now through this presentation.
Cool. Okay, let's see here. Nope, that's not what I want to do. There we go. Okay. I also do want to just reiterate before we get going, like Carly kind of touched on, this is obviously a really important step in the process, but before we do anything else, as far as development or anything, community outreach is like primary concern for us, and getting the community on board and getting the neighborhood, especially adjacent to this potential spot, completely on board and informed about what's potentially going to happen, and getting their feedback first if this does go through. So go ahead, Becky, all you.
Okay, I think we're a previous slide, I think, in the presentation. There we go. Yeah, so we started with our first community garden in 2018 when an opportunity presented itself. Basically, there were some private landowners who had some space that they wanted to see used for a good purpose. I was connected with them because a friend knew that I wanted to start a community garden, and everything just aligned, and we were able to install our first space on this private property, and that's out on East Bench Road near the golf course. That location has 10 plots for gardeners, and from the 2018 to 19 period, we were adopted by the Resiliency Hub, which is a 501c3 nonprofit in Moab. And so they're our umbrella organization, which provides financial backing resources for the Moab Community Gardens Group. This past year, we added a couple of new locations. So we established 5 plots at the Our Village Community Center. And we also have a garden on Center Street where we grow food just for the food bank. And we might possibly expand to a 3rd garden site. Next slide. So our mission is pretty simple and focused. What we're really concentrated on is creating sustainable organic community gardens for the benefit of Moab and Spanish Valley residents. And we want to do that by providing plots of irrigable land to individuals or families who otherwise might have limited access to gardening resources. But corollary with that, we also want to create welcoming community spaces that are open and safe for people of all abilities and backgrounds. Next slide. So the way that we function, there's a management group, which is comprised of site stewards. So each of these 3 gardens that I just mentioned has a unique site steward. They oversee activities at the garden, they communicate with landowners and the gardeners, they do maintenance at the site if any is required. And then our management group has those site stewards and then a couple other core volunteers that just want to assist us with operations. We have a very small budget. We ask for minimal fees from the gardeners. It's a sliding scale from $5 to $40 for the entire year for a plot. And that goes into a pool which basically pays for infrastructure such as tools, fencing, irrigation supplies, those sorts of things. All the land and water that we are using so far has been donated to us free of charge. Next slide. And so these are just a couple of pictures. We have typically had work days once a month where we invite gardeners and anyone else from the community who's interested in coming to see the garden. We do some weeding and infrastructure repair, get to hang out with each other, talk about gardening. Next slide. And then we've seen a lot of great growth at these gardens. These are pictures from 2018, but I could show more pictures from the last 2 years as well. We've had a lot of beautiful vegetable production, fruit trees, herbs, flowers. And so it's really been fun to see these spaces be developed. Next slide. And the pictures kind of took over this slide, but we've seen an increasing demand. I'm sure part of it is related to everyone trying to stay at home locally this year, but we had 27 applicants for gardening plots this year. And fortunately, we were able to squeeze everybody into those 15 plots that we've had. But every year, as word gets out, we've had more and more gardeners apply to join our group. And so we see a need for additional garden space to accommodate those folks, but also to improve accessibility to the gardens. The majority of our plots are out by the golf course, and a lot of folks have mentioned that, or have had to even back out because it's just too far for them to reach either on foot or bicycle, or even with a vehicle. It's just hard to make the time to make it out there. So these 2 reasons are the main reasons we're looking to develop a garden closer into the center of town. And then that last bullet just says, this is another opportunity to create a positive community space that's open to everybody. Next slide. And so if we are to develop another location with it like closer to the Moab downtown area, what we're looking for is a minimum of about 1/4 of an acre that would accommodate 10 gardening plots plus some common space for tools and composting. We're looking for a long-term agreement with the landowner. So something in the realm of at least a couple years. 5 years would be better, longer term is fine. But just something where if we put in the effort to develop a garden site, we want it to be able to be there year after year. We need a publicly accessible space. We try to be open from dawn to dusk so that people can go tend their vegetables during those times. And we need access to water. So over the past year and a half or so, we've been talking to various people. We've talked to the school board and the city and a couple of private individuals and just trying to think about where we might be able to put a garden like this that's close to Moab, the downtown Moab area. And so Makeda will talk about one option that we've been considering.
Okay. So this is Anonymous Park. It's across from the hospital, behind the bike skills or the bike jump park right now. Most of the property on this particular parcel is more in a flood zone, in a floodplain where it gets flooded periodically or every couple decades. The part in yellow that's highlighted here is the part that we are proposing to use as a community garden, and it's actually, you can't really tell on the map, but it's actually higher up than the rest of the parcel. So it's in kind of an upland area as opposed to like a riparian zone. It's primarily composed of like cheatgrass and a few invasive smaller trees and shrubs. So this is in orange, you can see kind of the area that we are proposing to use for the community garden space. The red little square awkward shape is the potential parking zone. It's pretty small. We don't anticipate there being many people there at once. Usually there's one person there. Often there's nobody there. It's kind of, people come a couple times a week when they're, after work, before work, during the day, and tend their gardens. So there's not a lot of groups of people there, hardly ever, unless we do our work when we're doing our work days. So, and then the bottom image, you can see that that's the floodplains. The light blue is the 500-year floodplain. And so this is above all of the century floodplain and the more regular occurring floodplain. So the benefits of the site is that you can drive in. We kind of assessed access via that way or from over by the bike jump park where the bathroom is. And that was kind of a hefty walk if people are carrying plants, if people are carrying children, if people are carrying any kind of equipment. So we did some research with Eric in the engineering department, and we actually own that driveway that comes out the corner of Bartlett Circle. So we'd be able to get through there if parking was allowed at the gardens. And it's pretty walkable from any part of town. So you could still come from the bike park or you could come through Bartlett Circle, but it's super accessible and in town still, which is nice. And it's not an area that's used very often. There's a path that kind of skirts it, you can see on the map, but otherwise it's mostly just, like I said, a cheatgrass field. It's pretty hot and fairly barren at the moment. We talked to Cara Dorand at Rim to Rim Restoration. She's been working on this park for over a decade, I think, at this point, and she's on board with doing something with this part of the park because it's been a little bit harder to re-veg. So it's something worth considering that it's not really being used otherwise at the moment. A couple of things that we would have to do to install a garden here is put in a water line from Bartlett Drive. We'd have to do some brush clearing, which we've talked to the DNR, Fire Fuels Removal Department has already potentially committed to helping us if this goes through, donating their time and helping us do removal of the brush and invasives in that space, given if we were given permission by the city to do so. We'd have to install an 8-foot garden fence to keep out the deer. And we would be developing garden plots and infrastructure in the form of some kind of tool storage, either a small shed or some bins, and amending the soil in the areas where we're going to be growing things. Let's see, next. It's a little laggy, sorry guys. This is just kind of a sample of like what a potential layout could be. We kind of came up with a couple different ones, but this is the most simple. So the dotted line is obviously the boundary of the garden. There's a workbench, tool storage, and an area for some compost. And then we also want to do a little bit more of like a community area for people that, people walk their dogs there and people go for just walks by themselves there and hang out in anonymous park. And so having an area with some community herbs and flowers and maybe some nice little benches or something. And then the fun stuff, here's the budget that we put together. It's kind of just a guesstimate at what we are looking at for the expenses and revenue for this particular garden install. So we went through and we talked to Levi over in the water department, and he was talking about an average water install for putting in the water connection and running the line around $3,000. We are guessing about $1,200 for annual usage of water. And then the expense of the DNR fuels crew would, if they were charging us for it, cost about $1,200 for 2 days of work. And then there's all the costs for putting the infrastructure, which I'm happy to go into if you'd like more detail. But then below in the revenue, like I said, DNR has committed to an in-kind donation for their labor, and then we would have volunteers come in and help us with the fence install, and hopefully donations of the tools and things that we need. We are asking that the city consider helping us with the installation of the water line and waiving our yearly water fees for irrigation. Hold on, let's see. So this is a rough timeline. This year, we want to get public support and get approval from the city to do this garden. If we do get the approval, we would move forward to getting public support. So we would be flyering the neighborhood adjacent. We would be talking to all the neighbors. We'd have time for public comment. We want to have a comment form and work with Lisa Church potentially to get like ideas from her of like what you guys normally do and how we would go about that process to make sure everybody's happy and everyone's on board and knows what's happening. We need to acquire funding, which we're working on, applying for grants and talking to you guys. We'd have to install the water line and then probably plant a cover crop. And then next year we would line out the plots, set out the irrigation. We're gonna do uniform irrigation so everybody has the same thing and that's less water waste, constructing the fence and doing soil amendments and that kind of stuff. And then the following year at the latest, we'd be welcoming gardeners and be planting all of the community aspects. It's kind of it's a flexible timeline. This is just kind of our rough guesstimate as to with the current pace we've been going at. And then this is kind of a picture of our other garden at full blossom. And yeah, so that's it.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I think you answered a lot of questions that this council had. Can we go ahead and unshare the screen so that we can see each other's faces? And again, really appreciate the presentation. I think we should move into questions from the council to either MOCOM or to staff, to Carly. Council, questions? None. Excellent. That means the presentation was so thorough that all questions are answered. On the agenda, this is briefing and possible action. What is, however, the timeline for this project? Is the action meant to be proceed with caution, slightly stronger than direction? What are you looking for?
I mean, what we're looking for is whether you have interest in us pursuing this further. And so that can look like a lot of different scenarios. If you do want us to proceed, but you have specific guidance, if you have specific activities that you want to see for the public engagement, public comment periods, public hearings, those kinds of things, just taking your feedback now as we start to develop a process if you want us to move forward.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I'm excited about the work that you're doing and the possibility of partnering with you. I feel like, I think the most critical thing will be talking to the neighbors because it is directly adjacent to some backyards, and I've been contacted by one of them, and I think they definitely want to give input, both in terms of like managing the impacts, but just sharing their knowledge of what goes on down there, since they've lived there for decades. I'm really reluctant to commit the city to water, paying for the water. It seems like I'd be disinclined to commit to it on a year-over-year basis, and then this year in particular, just that we created the community contributions program as a vehicle for sort of equitably distributing financial resources to different community groups, and I'd like to see that utilized as much as possible for this, as in concert with other worthy causes.
Other council members? Mike? Mike, you're muted. Sorry. You're muted.
My fault. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Of course, I know Claire and Jeff Adams and folks at the Resiliency Hubs and a great bunch of people. And I want to thank you guys for doing all this. The garden is, apple pie and mom and dad kind of thing. So, who could turn this down? This is a very unusual year, though, and we did set up community contributions just for this kind of amenities, subsidies, if you will, that the city would support worthwhile activities that the city can't otherwise do on their own. And so as much as I hate to say it, this is a really strange year and we don't have any money. So I'm, along with Kaylin, I'm reluctant to commit the money right now anyway. I'm with you in principle. I'm curious exactly how the parking and all and the access is going to work, so forth. But on the grounds that you can get past that I'm cool with that. But the money part of it is I'm a little leery of committee right now.
Tani?
And I agree in part with Mike and Kaylin. I'm not so concerned with initially installing the water line. I am concerned about committing the ongoing, the water ongoing year after year. Everybody that has a garden, no matter how small or how large, pays to water their own garden. And I feel like that should be part of it, because we have struggled so hard with our water fees and just fees in general. And so much work went into it. And I know it's nobody's intention to just, let things run all night or things like that go on, but it happens. And so if nobody's checking that and monitoring that, that could turn into quite an expense. On its face, I think it's a really good idea. But I would encourage you to really reach out to the folks in that neighborhood and maybe let them drive this more than we are.
Thanks, Tani. Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Karen,
I didn't mean to advocate our responsibility. I just meant yeah, you need direction from us whether to pursue it or not. But I think you need to take direction from them also and address their concerns as much as ours. Now I'm done.
I would see the public engagement informing the development and the finalization of the proposal. So it could be things like hours, like when people can go, how many people can be there, where they need to park, where they can't park, all of that kind of thing. So that would be part of the public engagement, is helping the neighborhood shape the use.
And it sounds like what I'm hearing is we need a public input on the process and what we could use it, how it should be used, which we've talked about developing, and that's easy. We can do that. Going forward, it sounds like what we need to do, it sounds like we're interested in doing it. It sounds like there's some concerns. It sounds like what we need to do is have engineering design the public access / parking, design what the water line looks like, determine the term of years and the language for an MOU. The money cost for the water would be offset until 2022 before the operations got going, which could be readdressed at that time. And also we could just in the MOU put that is a part of the responsibility of the garden community, and that they could request donations through the city's process annually, and that would be subject to approval. And then if not, then that cost would be passed back to the community garden group.
Yeah, they can maybe institute a higher fee than they usually do, or some may use, like, the fee might be higher for some users. I don't think that's accountable.
So I think if we brought back to this council, what I'm hearing, what we need to bring back to this council is engineering for the access, for the parking, the public process, getting input from the neighbors, engineering for the water line, and a draft MOU that addresses the water cost and the term of years. Karen?
I'm just curious why this is coming up now compared to when it should, like when all of our nonprofits or, you know, other entities try to bring up projects and try to get funds for doing something. Is this different?
Very different.
So it's not like a community contribution proposal. It's a little different. It's almost like we have some property. I kind of liken it to, this isn't exact, but to Salt Lake City's relationship with Tracy Aviary and Friends of Tracy Aviary. So like Salt Lake City owns the aviary, but they have a nonprofit come in and operate it. This would be our garden, basically. It's our land. We're not divesting of it. It's going to be our water line. The beds would be built and maintained by community gardens, and we would have the option potentially, I think there's a current draft of an MOU that we're kind of working on, that it would revert to us after a couple of years, potentially. Yeah, we might get a grant out of it.
And one of the main differences that I want to point out is this is city property, and one of the problems we've had with the bike skills park and that we had with Emma was city property was being used in a way or delegated in a way without any public process and before anyone knew. And we kind of were extremely far down the road before it came to public light that it was being used in this way. And a part of the argument became, well, we're too far in to turn back. We're at the very front of this. This is just starting, and we want to get out in front of it and say, this is a potential use for city property. This is something we want to use it for. We're going to follow a public process that wasn't followed in any of those other scenarios. Is this okay with this council if we proceed going this way, putting it out there to begin with, letting us begin the process? If it's not something that we have an interest in, then let's not even begin the process.
So I guess, it looks great, and I love gardening as well, but I'm totally guilty of leaving my water on all the time and forgetting, and I even have a timer, but I'm like, oh, you know, my tomatoes need a little extra. So I am not interested in obligating the city and funding the water if this is, something that can happen organically through the community gardens. That would be great. I love the idea of using that land because it's not being used now. It's sheet grass. We know we've got property like that elsewhere, and people are really having a heart attack over what we're trying to do with it. So I I'm not really interested in obligating the city financially, but allowing them to use the property, I'm definitely in favor of.
So our MOU will reflect that, and will reflect that the water is not covered by the city. And then the group will be eligible to apply for community contributions come 2022 or whenever they become. And at that point, Karen, it would be just like any other community contribution. They're a 50C3, they're asking for funds from the city in order to operate their costs. At that point, all the land use and everything else is behind us.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to be the standout here. I have nothing against community gardens. As you guys all know, when we talked about Emma, when I had to vote on that, I said, the reason I'm supporting this is only if it can be used to provide a greater community good. And one of the things that was discussed there was the potential of a community garden. And I can't advocate going further with this without more information. Like, I really feel like, especially after everything that happened with the bike skills park, I need more information. I need to know what other potential locations could be used. You know, Emma, for example, is right next to the school. I mean, if we're arguing that part of the reason for this is intergenerational poverty and food supply, it's right there, right next to the kids. And I'm not saying you have to use Emma, but I think what big part, I mean, you guys don't have to deal with all of the emails we're getting about the bike skills park and all of the anger in this community where people feel like they were not involved in the process. And I feel like the first thing we have a responsibility to do is decide, who are we as a city and what is our responsibility and what is our identity? Do we want to involve community members in how we use city property? And if the answer is yes, then we need to have a process moving forward to discuss from the get-go how we're going to treat every example equitably. So we approach it with a process from A to Z of how we decide who wants to use property and if we're willing to look at a change of use and how we're going to prioritize locations. We have a lot of anger right now about perceived or real wildlife uses at the bike skills area. Well, I would argue that you have even more of an argument for wildlife in this location. So if you want me to weigh in, you kind of have to show me the different city properties that were discussed and how this one floated to the surface, but you also need to make a stronger case to me of why this isn't an example of community contributions, because I need to answer to the other people in our community that say, you guys used to make individual decisions about projects, but you decided you wanted to have a process and everybody was going to meet these different criteria. And I don't feel like I can confidently say to those people, this does not fall into that process. Plus, I totally support community gardens. I totally support all of the social networking that it builds and all of the skills that it builds, but I can't fairly and equitably put this aside ahead of that, especially when we're talking about 10 plots, which is great, but how do I say to people, this was prioritized over yours and this benefits as many people or more than your project did? And how do I say to someone in the community who's struggling to pay their water bill right now, we're going to put $3,000 or $4,000 into a water connection and water, but I can't help you with your bill. I just feel like under COVID, and I know you all get sick of me saying it, but I feel like this is my obligation to the people who voted for me. I believe in process and I believe there has to be something in place. And especially after the bike skills park, I feel like we owe it to people to say to them, no, this is city property and we're going to make a call on this, fine, then tell them that. But if our identity is we want them involved in the process, then let's tell them what that process is and then come back to this particular project. But I just feel like this puts the cart in front of the horse. But I also think, if you want to speak specifics, then we do need to take some things into account. Like we do need to build the staff time into the budget, and we do need to argue with ourselves about why can we justify putting staff time and engineering time into this when we're saying we're already falling short on time to do things like provide key services like water and sewer. So, and I do need someone to show me the documents from the donation of Anonymous Park so I understand the boundaries and I understand the agreements we made with the donor. So I understand if this falls within it. I do need to understand the impacts I mean, one of the great things that we loved about community gardens was how it could play a role in our sustainability efforts and climate change. And I'm not really into sending more cars into that area. Like, I mean, wheelbarrow's fine, but I'm just nervous. Like, I'm not really sure we're looking big picture enough. So, and I just, there's a huge equity piece here. And, you know, let me as the one half brown person be the one to sit here and say that. But I can't do this without process. It flies in the face of everything I'm having to deal with and all the anger I'm having to deal with about the bike skills park and the opportunity we have to rectify what happened there. And again, I don't really care if I'm the only one who feels this way, but I have an obligation to say that from the experience I've had. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you for sharing that, Ronnie. Thank you. Does council have other comments? I mean, I have a few points that I think I'd like to share. I agree with Ronnie on several points. The first being that we are feeling a lot of community pushback about the bike skills park. And I don't want to go through that process again. I don't want to go through that again. And it is likely, Ronnie, you brought up really good points. It's likely that we are gonna go through that again, potentially. So, and also it is important to say, you know, we did identify Emma as a potential garden spot. Where we would be putting in water infrastructure for people to get, you know, drinking water, and that it is much more public. And I'm not even sure if you all were aware of that as a potential reclamation place for a potential garden. So, I mean, that's what we hope to do. They were aware?
Yeah, that was on the site list. We examined all city properties.
Okay. You know, in terms of process, it is always like, you know, what pulls the trigger to get something going? And so an inquiry from a nonprofit to get something going is, you know, our first step here. And this has all been really good feedback for staff, I think. I'm not sure we're at a place to take action tonight, unless a council member wants to make a motion. It seems like we have time also to think on this. And then the only other thing that I was going to share is that I would not be supportive of city resources going into anything other than the development of the lot. That would be my threshold. So infrastructure to a lot is our asset, but anything beyond that, I think, would be, like you're saying, Ronnie, not really equitable. Anything on top of that would have to go through community contributions. So, and it is important to recognize that we are using a lot of staff time. McKenna, I'm sure this is not like under your umbrella of Mark. So, but you know, with engineering and Carly and others that we're using staff time for this, which is, you know, that's reasonable because it's, you know, an inquiry for us to consider. So the question is, what, if any, action for tonight? And then if no action, then what's kind of the direction? And so I'm looking to council for either action or direction. So that could be in the form of a motion. It could be a motion to table. It could be in the action, no action, which then we would just move on.
I don't think we're at a place where we can reasonably give full direction at this point. I think if some council members need more information, that they probably should make an appointment to get that information so that they're comfortable however they decide. But I don't think we're at a place where we can give staff good direction.
Well, my personal pronoun is she, but I'll take that they. And I would like to follow up on our June 9th request, in which staff was going to come back to us with a process for when we repurpose or expand the use of city property. I'd like to see that first. But I'll leave that to the rest of the group.
We're still working on that. That process is coming forward, and no one is proposing that this process not follow that process.
Okay, well, I guess I will make a motion to table this until we have that process.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Karen. All those, roll call. One moment. Roll call in favor of that motion. Ronnie?
Aye.
Tawny?
Aye.
Kaylin?
No.
Karen?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you, Makeda and Becky, for joining us tonight and presenting. And I think there was a lot of good information both ways. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening to our proposal. I appreciate all the feedback, and we'll definitely think about it all. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. All right, y'all have a good evening. And we are going to move on to agenda item 8.2. I just do want to point out that we're at 9:38 right now. So we're at agenda item 8.2, discussion of potential pre-annexation agreement request for 10.02 acres located adjacent to the current city limits in the vicinity of 500 West by KM Real Estate Enterprises LLC and M. Dean and Company LLC property owner. This is discussion only. And Nora?
Okay, so hi everybody again. So this should be very brief. All that are here to talk about is whether or not the city council wants to entertain a pre-annexation agreement for this property. This property has a history, and they actually requested a rezone in 2017. It was quite contentious. There were a lot of adjacent property owners who had some pretty major concerns about any type of commercial development. There were a number of different zones that were considered. There was sort of an informal questionnaire that went out to all the adjacent property owners. There was a lot of public comment opposed to it. There was also some public comment in favor of it. Anyway, it was quite a long process. And the property owner, represented also by their attorney, Kevin Anderson, have asked if the city would entertain a pre-annexation agreement. This is something that we have done in the past for very unusual circumstances. For example, we did the Lionsback Holdings property, not Lionsback, but Lionsback's holding property for the motel just south of town. And they had extenuating circumstances because it basically got caught in the middle of a moratorium action. And there were things that had been relied upon, and there were expenditures made. And so because of that, the pre-annexation agreement was probably an appropriate way to go. Or you guys determined that anyway. So this applicant wants to do a pre-annexation agreement here. And the only thing that's really in the pre-annexation agreement the only thing that it commits to is that if this is annexed, after it goes through the process, that it would be zone C2. And basically, no annexation petition has been filed on this property yet. But they're interested in getting a commitment that says that if you guys go through the process and decide that should be annexed, that the property would be designated C2. The city council can choose, if the city council does not want to enter into a pre-annexation agreement, and I'm not sure it buys the property owner an awful lot because they have to go through the public process anyway. They can choose to just file a petition and go through the normal process, which includes the city council accepting the petition for review. That's the first step. And then there's a certification step, which requires lots of different public notices to different people in different ways. And then ultimately, the planning commission reviews it and makes a recommendation to the council, and the council would decide whether they want to annex or not and under what conditions. And those things would be expressed in an annexation agreement, and zoning would be decided on the property. So at this time, when in 2017, they were looking at C4 and R4, so commercial zone, and then also some higher density residential zone. That's not on the table anymore as far as the owner is concerned. They want C2 zoning as they move forward. So all I need is, do you want to entertain us looking at a pre-annexation agreement? Now, the exact pre-annexation agreement that was submitted was drafted by the applicant. And Lori, as our city attorney, hasn't really had an awful lot of time to review any detail. So if you direct us that that there's some interest in entering into a pre-annexation agreement, then Lori and the applicant and Joel would begin to negotiate that a little bit to make an agreement that Lori is more comfortable with. So that's all I need to know. Do you want to entertain a pre-annexation agreement as to zoning, or do you want this project to go through the normal annexation process, which it will have to do either way? Yes, ma'am.
I would favor the normal process.
I would agree with that. This feels like an end run around us. So I don't want you guys to put any time into this.
Ditto from my end.
Karen, you're muted.
Mine as well. I'm not interested in skipping any steps.
And I concur. I think it is typically it's a long and potentially expensive process. And so I can understand the desire to go to the final deciders early on to take their temperature. But in this case, they've already been through the process once. So much of the pre-work, I imagine that the applicant would have to do has already been done, which just leaves the time. But I'm really uncomfortable with this came up last time, the whole issue of the vested rights, which makes me really uncomfortable and unsure as to what they're after. So
Yeah.
I concur with the rest of the council.
And that's that.
Yes.
That
Thank
is
you.
that. We're going to move on. And we're at 8.3, discussion of potential ordinance 2020-13, creating the rules and regulations pertaining to the administration of bicycle and scooter share permit program. Discussion only. Joel.
I think the summary agenda kind of summed up what we're trying to do. The proposed ordinance is nothing more than that. It's a draft in its purest form. If you guys want us to tell us we want nothing like it, we'll do that. If you want to make changes to it, we'll do that.
Ronnie?
Lori, can I ask you a question? So one thing I was confused about are the bike and scooter share programs something in Utah where we have to allow them somewhere within city limits, kind of like sexually oriented businesses, or people can just apply, but you don't necessarily have to allow them somewhere? I just didn't understand if someone applied for a permit, if you had to say yes.
So
No, and Joel, Joel has an answer.
So I drafted this and I've done all the legal research on it. Currently, if someone applied for it, we wouldn't have a lot of grounds to tell them no. We could tell them no and take on the legal fight that would come with that. I've done a lot of outreach to a lot of other communities and the league. If we go that route, we'll basically be standing out on that limb by ourselves. I've been asked by the league and other communities to not venture into that territory. It's not saying that we can't.
I guess my other question is, I don't really understand how a permittee would function here, at least if their scooters and bikes were e-bikes, because you can't have them on the sidewalk. As I read it, you can't have them on the highway. You can't have them on the parkway. So would they just exclusively operate on one side of the highway or the other, and they couldn't cross Main Street unless they broke the rules? But then you need enforcement. How does that work?
Depending on your policy position on this, that may be the silver lining, right? It's not us regulating them out of the market.
I think there's a place, right now, bicycles are not allowed on the sidewalk. They're discouraged on Main Street. So could they cross
This is just
191? Could you take center 100 east to 100 west?
But you'd be crossing a highway. I mean, I'm sure people would do it in the scofflaw way, and they wouldn't. We don't have enough law enforcement to ticket them. But
I think every point you just, I don't want to get into the policy side of this because that's for you guys to decide. So I'll just say, I'll give you both sides. If your policy is you don't prefer to have this type of use in our community, those regulations exist whether we do nothing regardless. And so those are already a deterrent to anyone opening a business to try and do this, because if we do nothing, they're still out there. If you make this permitting process a part of that, layered on top of those regulations that already exist, it just becomes that much harder to do it. If the policy is no, we want these things, then we need to tailor this language in this proposed ordinance to make it so we are accommodating more so to that type of use. And that's how we want this policy to be. So you can, as the legislative body who will pass the rule for how we regulate this industry, that's entirely up to you guys to decide how you want to proceed. Do you want legislation that is more amenable to that type of a use, or do you want legislation that follows trend with how the federal government's regulated a lot of this, and it's just another part of the process in order for them to be permitted?
So it seems like I have been to other communities where bike share programs were part of the mobility solutions, and it seems like it could help us here. So I would like us to be open to one and regulate it so that it meets our needs. Bike share doesn't have to mean e-bike. E-bikes have become popular recently, but the Moab city itself is relatively flat. And so it could be regular human-powered bikes. I'm not sure if scooters work quite as well. I know they've been controversial in other communities. I realize there's details to work out, but in general, I'd like you to pursue it. I have some concerns. I mean, I'm treating this as a very rough draft because if I were to mark this up, there would be a lot of red. I'll just leave it at that. So, I mean, I feel like it's not even at a point where I'm even prepared to comment on it.
That's perfect. And that's what we're looking for is I have no clue on the spectrum what you guys want to do with this. I know these are coming. And so I feel like we need to start the process where I, as a staff, start getting the information we need in order to be able to get there. So this is a complete shot in the dark, like, hey, I'm throwing this out there. Now you guys tell me that it's completely wrong, or it's okay but needs changed, or it's close. Like, I have no clue where we're at with this whatsoever.
Tawny, then Ronnie.
Just to be clear, we're not under any kind of time frame. Nobody has requested this. So we've got time to develop this so that it works for us in our situation. Okay.
Yeah, we thought we had a little bit of a lighter agenda tonight. When we created the agenda, so we thought, hey, we could use some filler tonight. We could have a philosophy discussion and a policy discussion on how we see bike share programs, and we could start hashing some of this out to get some work done.
No, and I would agree with Kaylin. I'd like to see a little more work done on it, but I think it needs to function for us.
Ronnie.
As everyone probably knows, I mean, this stuff has been in the news all across the country and the world the past few years. So maybe it would save some time or help as a starting point to pull some of the ordinances that some of those communities have that have dealt with some of the biggest conflicts. I'm thinking Salt Lake was, I mean, obviously just in the paper about having public input on theirs, but we know on the West Coast there are examples. So maybe, or we can even ask at CAST if there are folks who've already been doing it, but maybe that'll save some time. It certainly seems like some of the complaints I've heard from other communities are just some of the problems you have with maintenance. So it seems like as specific as you can be about maintenance and when things aren't maintained. I mean, friends have told me in other parts of the country, you know, you end up with units that are, you know, placed on a trash heap or something because they haven't been maintained in time, or, you know, sometimes they're using gig workers to deal with some of the units, and that sometimes has some drawbacks just in terms of how things are handled. So, I mean, there may just be some, just even in a basic news search of communities in the West, a lot of articles that draw on just some of the problems people have had. There's some stuff in here that already deals with some of the nightmares people are having, like, okay, you leave them in the middle of the sidewalk and blah, blah, blah. And I like the fact that Salt Lake said, okay, you know, you actually have to take a physical photo of where you've left it. It doesn't mean it's not going to move, but it's at least better than them getting left hither and yon. I don't know what you do about units maybe being taken into people's homes or apartments so that they're not available to people, because that's something you see in an urban environment. Here in a rural environment, that might be less of an issue. I wasn't sure either with the docking. If we do dock, it's good probably that planning's making the call on where the docks are going to be, but I imagine with our sidewalks, we're already limited or have a lot of competing demand, so we're going to have to be a little bit creative about where we could fit docks.
Mike?
Yeah, I just, I frankly don't have a lot of experience with scooter docking and stuff like that. I mean, I've read about it and so forth, but I haven't really spent much time around it. And it's not clear to me how, excuse me, how it would work in Moab. So I'm with Tawny and all that before I really want to get into the weeds on the draft that you did, Joel. And thank you for doing that. That's great. I get to decide for myself, do I want the damn things in the first place? And would they be successful here in Moab? And would they just clog the sidewalks, or would they add something positive to the town? It's not clear to me which is which. It could be Kaylin's right in part that bike share would be a good thing and scooters maybe not. I just don't know. So that's, I could use some help from you guys who've had more experience with them about whether they'd be a good thing for the town or not. And then we can proceed from there.
Well, just because of what's kind of being said, this is a hybrid of several rules that come out of Colorado. I reviewed several Utahs. I reviewed several tourist communities in Colorado, and I thought that the Colorado ones were better than the Utah ones. And so this is a hybrid of those. So I'd like to take credit that this is my work, but that would be far reaching.
Karen?
I just temperature wise, I'm definitely more amiable, and I don't want to shut it off and say, no, there's no way we, at least I would like to hope that the city would be open to looking at multi-modality options. So.
Well, oh, yes, Ronnie, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know if you're comfortable answering this, Karen, but I think one of the concerns people have had around the world with this is sometimes you have a multinational corporation coming into a community, and sometimes in a city that's less of a competition issue, but certainly in a rural community, I mean, it sounds like we can't necessarily probably say no, but I mean, what's the impact? Say if a multinational like Lime or somebody came in, does that impact our local bike shops and any bike rental they would be doing, or not really? Because what they're renting is probably going on the trail and not being used in town.
But the bikes that you typically see in cities are a completely different hybrid. I think there is two, not bike shops, but like the tourist center, or there's two businesses that have like cruisers, and because they're filling a need that, some folks just want to have a bike to, go to dinner on and maybe take part of the bike path. But no, the bike shops that we have, it would not be a competition with that at all.
I think we have a congestion problem downtown. And I think if people could scoot their way to downtown for their meals, that'd be great. And I do support multimodal transportation downtown as well. And I'll go so far as to say, I think we need to really look, and we've said this before, and we've put it, kicked it to staff too, like the idea of looking at our agreements with our shared use pathways, and whether or not scooters and e-bikes could be allowed on them, because especially as we see the North Corridor developed, I would much rather people check out a scooter or a bike from their hotel room and then bring it on in town. That is my coin purse of 2 cents, or however much change I just offered there. Joel, what other feedback would you like from us?
Is this collectively something you want us to pursue?
I want it. Kaylin wants it. Karen wants it. Tawny wants it. But Mike and Ronnie are not sure.
No, I mean, I think an ordinance is a good thing. I mean, this stuff is coming. So I would just say, yeah, go with the research that Tony's recommending. And
there's two blended ideas in there, and I think that may be what's causing some of the confusion. You have the multimodal idea, and then you also have the electric side of that idea. And we could break them out and make them two separate ordinances.
I almost wonder about like dealing with, I kind of feel like they should be treated equitably, whether they are part of a bike share program or a traditional rental or owned. I mean, they're vehicles, and we don't make differentiations between rental cars and personally owned cars. It's like
the difference here though is this is the regulation to permit the business that's operating the rental side of it. So you're right, we don't, once the car is on the road, we don't have different regulations for them. And I see what you're saying, Kaylin. This is more along the idea of the once that business wants to come into town, what are the requirements for them to be here? And so maybe that's where this is breaking down too, is we need more regulation on once they're on the road versus what the business aspect of permitting is.
right, because it might actually make what this potential ordinance is regulating a little bit narrower, and then there's this other aspect that needs to possibly be addressed, like what happens on the bike path.
Okay.
I mean, it seems like that's what, that article that Ronnie shared with us from Salt Lake, now that regulation is where you're getting into the weeds with whoever is going to, take on the contract, and, and creating a very high standard of service that they have to provide for the community. I mean, I think that's where we can really put our foot down and say, okay, it's not going to be allowed on, Main Street sidewalks. And, the docks do have to be, you know, the bikes or the scooters or whatever, they are going to have to go back. And how do you know, put the onus on the companies to make sure that they're maintained and they're put where they're supposed to.
Mm-hmm. I do like that. I do like I think scooters are pretty fun. Also, as I've seen them in other cities, it is kind of annoying to see them just scattered all over the place. So having, you know, approved drop locations to solve for that and the other tweaks that we've seen. Yeah. But Joel, is that enough?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can work with that.
Okay. Yeah, we have spent so much more time together tonight than I thought we would. But you know, I'm grateful to all of us for coming together and spending the time to have these discussions, because that really helps to inform staff so that we're not spinning our wheels unnecessarily. Okay, we are at section 9, approval of the bills against the city of Moab. Is there a motion?
I move that it's bedtime. I move to approve the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $294,258.79.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Discussion? None. I will call for the vote. Roll call. Ronnie.
Aye.
Tawny.
Aye.
Kaylin.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Fantastic. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Thank you, Mike. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Karen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for coming together tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, staff, for the work that you did to prepare for this meeting. Everybody have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.